What's something poor and rich people don't have, but the middle class does? Story 1. A lawnmower. Yes, I'm out many weekends mowing the yard, blowing leaves and other yard care activities. My wealthier neighbors have these yard service teams come in with their high-powered tools and spend about an hour doing all the work it takes me a good part of the day to do. I used to own a lawn mowing company, and it made a huge difference when I was able to afford better equipment. Honda walk-behinds are worth the extra cost, as our Echo and Stihl trimmers. My favorite mower of all time was a snapper deck whose motor had died, and my mechanic recommended I replace the motor with a commercial-grade Honda motor. It was an absolutely amazing Frankenstein's monster. All these products are available at places like Home Depot, I think. I could do a half-acre corner lot solo in 25 minutes, including edging, trimming, and blowing, sweeping up all the cuttings. With regular oil changes and maintenance, the good equipment will last forever and will save you a lot of time. I'm definitely not rich, but I decided after a few years of mowing that it's just not worth it, and hired someone to do it. I would have to be out there every other weekend at the crack of dawn, otherwise it's way too hot. Even at 7 a.m., it's 80+ degrees Fahrenheit, with 95+% humidity. I would sweat my balls off, and I never got to sleep in on those weekends. It was so worth the $45 every other week to be able to sleep in with air conditioning on Saturday. Story 2. Garage refrigerator. This is a great one. We had to buy a new fridge because ours was breaking down. It was kind of fun buying one since it's probably the biggest purchase we've made in a long time. And when it got delivered, it came with a free smaller fridge, which I thought was really weird because I didn't even know. The first few times I came home and saw our garage fridge, I thought, la-di-da, look at me and my fancy extra fridge. No complaints though, just easier access to drinks. We have a full-sized one now. When we bought a new house a while back, the fridge in the kitchen that was left by the previous owners worked fine, but was beaten to hell, like they had regularly had fistfights in the kitchen and the fridge had gotten in the way or something. So when we bought a new fridge after settling in, we decided to just keep it and throw it in the garage. Best decision ever. We are a family of 5 with 3 permanently ravenous teenagers, and the extra space is so very useful since we can buy bulk at Costco to save money. Yeah, save money. We have 3 fridges and a mini fridge. Our main fridge, a fridge for leftovers / meal packed items, a drink fridge, and then the mini fridge in the loft. In our first house, our fridge died and it was going to take about a month to get it fixed through a home warranty. We grabbed a second used fridge for like $200, a lot for us at the time, while we waited. The old fridge was repaired and became our drink fridge. Moved to our second house, dragging the drink fridge along, and the fridge that comes with the house doesn't have a water or ice dispenser and isn't as deep as we would like. So we go buy a new fridge. A couple of years later, we were moving again, really liked our new fridge, so we took it, and the drink fridge, to our new place. Good thing we did because the new place's fridge isn't as deep as our fridge, so now we have 3 again. Needed snacks or cold drinks in the loft for the kids, so we bought a mini fridge. We are definitely middle class. Story 3. A worry about credit ratings. If you are rich, you don't care because you are rich. If you're poor, you don't care because you have 0 credit. But if you're in the middle, this is really important. I don't know, I feel like anyone who has an issue of a credit score is fooling themselves that they're middle class. A high score literally only requires consistently paying your debt. Even minimum payments on credit cards are enough. Anyone that isn't a negative net worth shouldn't really have an issue with this. It is not any more important to any financial class of people. It's the same. A high credit score means that you are responsible as a person, not that you worry about it. A poor person can have a high credit score. Rich people can have a crappy one, and it does hurt them, by the way, and the middle class can have either as well. None of it is exclusive or indicative. A middle class person does not need better credit any more than any other financial class, but they are by far the most irresponsible with it. If you worry about it, you are not a responsible person to begin with, because a responsible person would only spend within their means, meaning yesterday, today, and the future. I know we all like to wink and nod and rail against the boot on our necks, but responsible people know what I'm talking about. We all have high credit scores. With the exception of just losing a job and having to put groceries on the credit card, people, a bad credit rating or one not good enough is an indication of irresponsibility. A credit score is 100% based upon paying what you owe on time. You may not have much credit if poor and have no opportunities, but it's still, or can be, good credit. Likewise, a rich person can have bad credit, and it hurts their ability to purchase things, as the rich do not actually keep dollar bills in a pillow. That is all it is. Be responsible and your credit will be as high as you ever need it to be. Story 4. Road trips. The rich Uber takes a plane, and poor people don't really have time or a reliable car. A wealthy friend of mine flies to her parents' house in Florida for a month during the holidays, and she pays someone to drive her car and her dog down and flies the driver home. After New Year's, she pays the driver to fly down to bring them back up, and she flies home. Shipping a car can cost up to $1,000 each way, and renting a car for that long is likely a lot more, so I can see where this is the more cost-effective option. Plus, if it's a big dog, you can't have it in the cabin and cargo is terrible. So driving is really the only option. So while this is a privileged thing to be able to do versus driving herself or not taking the trip, it's not as wasteful or absurd as it sounds. Speaking as someone who grew up poor and knew a lot of other people my age who were poor, I don't think this is really true. The only vacation any of us ever knew was road trips. Usually it was a very cheap trip, like camping, visiting family, or driving a couple hours away to get to St. Louis. I'm from Southwest Indiana, where there are tons of free things to do, like the zoo, science center, museums, etc., and driving back the same day, so no money was spent on a hotel. For people in deep poverty, this is probably true, but even for families just below the poverty line like mine, road trips were still possible sometimes. Only about 8% of the American households do not own a car, while about 11% are in poverty. So even people in poverty sometimes have cars. Interestingly enough, for a large portion of my childhood, the household I lived in did not own a car. My dad and uncle both worked at a used car lot, and the owner let them borrow cars all the time. The owner even let them borrow a vehicle long enough for us to all go visit my grandma's sister for a week over the summer. It was definitely a unique situation, but it's probably not super rare for people to have access to cars that they don't own, even if they're poor. Yeah, I grew up in the second poorest county in the nation, but you needed a car to get around realistically. One family in particular, I remember their trailer home was falling apart, holes you could fall into, but they had a seemingly endless supply of vehicles. Usually they kept 2 at a time unless one broke or crashed. Now I live in the city and poverty is just different here. People don't/can't own a vehicle, but they'll buy all their groceries at the closest liquor store and pay twice as much as they would if they shopped smart. Also, choosing to live in an SRO. I don't know how that choice could feel like the right one, and I've been homeless. Agreed. Grew up really poor, shared a bed with family because we couldn't afford a second bed/room, hand-washed clothes in the tub and hung them to dry because the laundry was too expensive, etc. But my mom would save up as much money and vacation time as she could so that we could take a week off during my summer break for a road trip. We'd camp, stay in weird cheap motels with character that we swap stories about now. Remember the one with the hole punched in the bathroom door? We'd pack a cooler full of food since fast food was a luxury only for very long haul days and always Taco Bell, and we made a grand time of it. I genuinely didn't realize how poor we were until I hit middle school because my mom did such a good job of making things seem fun, and my dad just straight up blew money on fun things instead of necessities. Story 5. Economy tickets on American Airlines. Poor can't afford the flight. Rich are not flying economy. No one who flies first class actually pays the price you see when you're buying tickets. It's usually from credit card miles or watching the prices last second when they bottom out and aren't that expensive to upgrade. I've flown domestic first class on American Airlines the last 3 times I went from DFW to Orlando by watching the prices. As it gets closer to the flight, they start dropping because people don't actually pay the original asking price. All 3 times it was an extra $150 round trip. Flew business to Amsterdam from DFW this summer after signing up for their credit card. Buying an economy ticket, getting $400 back as a promotion for spending $1,500 in 3 months, which the ticket instantly took care of, plus the miles for doing it, then spent 300 plus 25k miles to upgrade to business, since they were available due to no one actually paying several $1,000s for one. So I ended up spending $100 less than a regular economy extra ticket. I'm the kind of person you see in first class, not people spending outrageous amounts of money. The main exception to that would probably be business execs who are doing it with company money. Story 6. In my personal experience, I would say time to spend with their families. My dad worked 7 days a week for 15 years. In that time, I can count the number of days he took off, including holidays, on 2 hands. And we were very poor. I never saw the guy. My rich friend never saw his father due to work either. The only difference is I was alone every day in a tiny apartment and he was alone every day in a big house. But we were both alone. People forget how much hard work it is at a super high-paying job. Most people do 6 days a week with a few hours on Sunday to plan for the week. It's the same for low-paying jobs. The cleaner in our office does it after she finishes her job during the day, and I believe she does another office building after hours. This is like a 12 to 16-hour workday, which is horrible. I always tell people, if possible, get a job with a barrier to entry like a profession or a trade. After that, you can do with it as you like, as supply is likely never going to saturate the market. Engineer here, I don't work half as hard as I did when I worked excavation. Literally digging ditches and holes for spotting. Long hours, hard work, and crap pay. We relied on overtime. Every time I have moved up in my life, I have made more and worked less. I'm at a point now where I feel like moving up comes with more responsibilities and work hours than I want. Kind of feels like I'll never be as happy or comfortable as I am now if I decide to move up. So I'll take my middle-class rut and hold on to it as long as I can. I was raised middle, maybe upper middle class, and it was the same. Turns out most paid jobs are greatly preferable to being at home and taking care of kids for most people. LMAO. I say this as a 30-year-old child-free woman. It took until maybe my teenage years to realize it, but while everyone praised my dad for working so hard, my mom, who was mostly a stay-at-home mom, definitely got the crap end of the stick and constantly was wanting to work, but their boomer trade ways wouldn't let it happen. I'm not saying every parent or man is like this, not at all, but a lot of people, once they have kids, actively escape to work. It's unbelievably stressful, laborious, and exhausting to be home with kids. And trust me, I'm now a broke millennial and nowhere near the same tax bracket as my parents, LOL, and I realize that a lot of people are just forced to grind to put food on the table, and that's the case for many parents, especially today. But for a lot of them, work is a refuge. It's fortunately less of a thing now than it was a generation ago because people don't feel like they just, by default, have to have kids. So fewer people who never wanted them or can't afford them are having them. And millennial parents, and especially fathers, are a lot more involved on average than their parents were, but it still happens all the time. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate children or something, LOL. I actually worked with young kids for years in elementary schools and volunteered to babysit for friends and family when they needed it, but I know I could never take on the parent role. And my experience through work and with friends I have now has just supported this realization, that even today, many of those who don't necessarily have to work as much as they do choose to once they have kids. My parents went from severe northern Quebec rural in the 50s to low income, then eventually middle class. I barely saw my dad any of that time until he landed a union position. I know plenty of rich folks who spend all their time doing nothing but spending their money only to watch it make more money without actually working. Their children are raised on massive properties with every opportunity to do whatever they want, and they do. I'd say rich people have all the luxuries we assume they're missing out on. I know plenty of folk from all classes who absolutely loathe their families and go to work to get away. Rich people just have money, and yeah, I'm convinced they're not driven to help anyone but themselves, but to think that they don't see their families is seriously handpicking the ones that don't. There is an incredibly large majority of rich people who simply don't show it off but have generations of wealth they can survive on for generations to come. Story 7. No financial aid, but no money to afford college either. Of a security net in general, the worst part of being the working poor / trying to claw your way up from poverty is that your borderline homeless income stream means you don't qualify for anything. Like, the same thing could be said for medical debt. Rich people don't get it. The lowest rung of the ladder is covered, and people on the next rung up are absolutely screwed. My husband and I work to survive. We are barely able to pay the bills and buy groceries. We have a bunch of medical debt that will be ongoing because I have chronic lifelong illnesses and we don't qualify for any type of assistance because our income is about $10K above the threshold. We could file bankruptcy if we chose to, but it would cause us to lose our house, which we own outright after using his 401K to pay off the mortgage once he turned 59 and a half. Plus, the medical debt would keep adding up afterward because chronic illnesses. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't when you're part of the working poor. The thing I don't hear discussed enough is the fact that helping people go to college benefits all of us. Just one example, we have far too few doctors in the US. Even rich people need doctors and want the best ones. Some people who would like to be doctors and would be great ones don't even go to college because they can't afford it. The same could be said for many professions as well as the trades. The return on investment is good for the whole society. My family had just enough money to not qualify for full financial aid at my college, but what they didn't take into account is that we were living in the #1 most expensive county in the country because we were living with my grandparents and inherited half the house when they passed. And we're struggling to stay afloat. Andy's parents had 2 other kids put through college at the same time, who also barely didn't qualify for financial aid. So I left college with like $70K in student loans, and my mom took out some parent loans. Story 8. Middle-class anxiety regarding manners and appearances. Victorian manners were a novelty largely associated with the middle class that was expanding in the 19th century England. The upper class could always get away with doing whatever they wanted, and the lower class people had nothing to lose, so they didn't give a crap. But the middle class had something to lose, namely their social standing, which they worked very hard to maintain. I should always find that the calamities of life were shared among the upper and lower part of mankind, but that middle station had the fewest disasters, and was not exposed to so many vicissitudes as the higher or lower part of mankind. Nay, they were not subjected to so many distempers and uneasiness either of body or mind as those who were by vicious living, luxury, and extravagances on one hand, or by hard labor, want of necessaries, and mean or insufficient diet on the other hand, bring distempers upon themselves by the natural consequences of their way of living. That the middle station of life was calculated for all kinds of virtues and all kinds of enjoyments. That peace and plenty were the handmaids of a middle fortune, that temperance, moderation, quietness, health, society, all agreeable diversions, and all desirable pleasures were the blessings attending the middle station of life. I went to a nice hotel with my in-laws recently. I'm an immigrant from another country though. I've been here a while and am a citizen now. Still, I've always had to adapt and exist in places where I'm the outsider by default, and when I came here I was definitely poorer than everyone I went to college with. The in-laws, they're middle-class Americans. I was surprised by how anxious they were about not being good enough, not well dressed enough, and too loud for the hotel restaurant. The restaurant of the hotel that we were staying at. I was like, it's a hotel restaurant and it's almost empty. Who cares? And it's Los Angeles, not New York City or something. They live and grew up an hour away from LA. No shorts are dressing up here. Famous people dress like hobos here. I was really baffled. They were still talking about it a month later at Thanksgiving. Story 9. Medical care debt. The poor get government-subsidized healthcare, glad they do, and the rich can pay for their own medical care. I do well financially, but medical care and health insurance eat up a lot of my net earnings. Sadly, the bar for being poor as it applies to qualifying for Medicaid is a lot harder to reach than you might think. In the late 2000s, I went through a rough stretch and was absolutely shocked that making less than $20K a year didn't qualify as poverty. That was well below the line where I had to take a calculator to the grocery store, and that always felt like a warning zone to me. There is still a solid chunk of people who sit well below what I thought of as middle class when I was growing up who are stuck finding insurance through the ACA or their employer. Insurance in quotes because it generally ends up being the tier that covers almost no preventative care and saddles you up with 5K plus deductibles. We used to qualify for state insurance, super cheap. Almost everything was covered. Qualified for a solid amount of food stamps too. After a promotion, we over-earned by a couple of grand a year. We were hit with a $500 a month of health insurance, plus now paying for all of our groceries. We over-earned a couple of grand, but with the new bills, we made substantially less than we did with assistance. It was insane. There's no transition, either you qualify for all the help or none of it. That's why there's a certain mentality where people don't want to move up too high because then they lose their help and their quality of life decreases a lot. It's better to stay just below the line than to get above it and claw your way to safety. We had a really hard few years when we just started earning above assistance qualifications. I had a period of time where I made too much to qualify for subsidized marketplace insurance, but nowhere close to affording monthly premiums on individual insurance, along with copays, deductibles for using that said insurance. Was able to get a health insurance subsidy when I went back to school to get another degree because my employer did not offer insurance for PRN employees and I did not qualify for Medicaid. Not that it would cover the medical care that I actually used: sick visits with primary care, yearly gyne visits, eye exam, routine dental care, and prescriptions. The only type of Medicaid my state offered for my income type is family planning, which only covered getting sterilized, birth control, STD treatment, and if you were admitted through the ER. I need healthcare that will cover the occasional cold or flu or a broken ankle. Story 10. Yard work. About to close on my first house, and there's about 2.5 acres of lawn, so at Thanksgiving dinner it comes up about how we're gonna handle the lawn. I said, oh, I'll just buy a Craftsman mower from Facebook Marketplace and do it myself. My dad erupts and goes, damn, just hire a lawn care guy, it's only like $300 a week for a lawn, like that. I tell my dad, I don't think I can shell out $300 a week, or every other week, just to mow the lawn. My family took great pride in doing our own yard work, cleaning our pond, power washing the basketball court, and installing an outdoor sump pump. My family had a lot of money, but I feel like my dad and grandpa almost enjoyed it or enjoyed teaching their kids to take pride in maintaining their own. Their favorite quote is, make your corner of the earth a little less crappy. I had friends growing up with significantly less money than my family who had lawn care services. I guess it's just your family values. Story 11. Often an acute sense of the value of consumer goods and services. If you don't have any money, everything over a certain dollar amount is expensive, no matter what it is. Its quality or the value it brings to your life. If you have tons of money, very few things you're likely to run across in a typical store seem too expensive to you, even if it might be dramatically higher in price than a similar item of similar quality. I was raised middle class. My boyfriend was raised in poverty. He's extremely intelligent and even went to an Ivy League on a scholarship, but he just has this mental block and cannot understand money. To him, it's just something that appears randomly and slips out of your fingers in moments. He acts like I'm some sort of wizard for being able to save any amount, lol. He's a generous person but will waste so much money on random gifts to people. He's getting better, lol, but when we first started dating, we'd have an empty fridge, and the moment he got his hands on some cash, he'd show up with designer boots he bought me, or suggest we go out to some extravagant sushi place. We're now 30 with next to useless degrees and horrible salaries, lol, but I managed to keep it together to an extent because I had the privilege of being taught how to. He seems to somehow just not have a natural grasp on the entire concept. Story 12. Children with names that aren't insane. If you're called Portia or Crystal, your parents are either mega rich or dirt poor. I'd say it's the nouveau riche who prefers weird names. Good old families typically choose good old names, due to tradition or a profound lack of creativity. Family names, her maiden name as a first name for example, or classical names, Shakespeare, ancient Rome, etc. are not uncommon. Story 13. The ability to fake stability while drowning in hidden struggles. Poor people don't have the resources to fake it. Their struggles are out in the open for everyone to see. Rich people don't need to fake it, they've got more money than problems, but the middle class, they've mastered the art of looking comfortable while quietly stressing about mortgages, car payments, and keeping up appearances. It's like a magic trick, except the magician is broken by the end of the show. Story 14. An enthusiasm for restaurants like Chili's. I feel like it's more influenced by region. I'm middle class and grew up middle class on the East Coast, New Jersey. My family would go out to eat maybe once a month, and about a quarter of the time it was a chain like Chili's. Most of the time it was an independent restaurant, but I have a family in the Midwest who thinks Olive Garden is the peak of Italian cooking. Not saying Olive Garden is bad. It's decent, except those breadsticks, I'll kill for those. But I have like 15 actual good Italian restaurants in the driving range that cost just as much. A perfect example is when my wife and I were dating. About 5 years ago, we went to Red Lobster, spent roughly $60. A couple weeks later, we went to a really good seafood place, Max's in Gloucester City. If you're in the area, I highly recommend it. It's a hidden gem. Spent about $60, but for food that was 10 times as good. Haven't been back to Red Lobster since. Story 15. Frivolous decorations. We just recently got to a place financially where I can replace things like our 15-year-old blackout curtains from our first apartment. I still bought the new ones from a thrift store, but I didn't have to stick to rental rules. I'm considering my cheap-ass lace curtains a victory. I could finally afford to buy an apartment last year, and the first thing after getting the keys was repaint a room. It felt like such a victory. So tired of living in rentals that were painted landlord white. Story 16. Time. If you're rich, you can use money to have other people do things that take your time. Cooking, cleaning, driving, shopping, it's taken care of. You can spend your time however you want. If you're super poor, I'm talking about the homeless poor, you have all the time in the world. Not that you can use it any way you see fit, but you have it. In between, people who work 40+ hours a week, second jobs, they call them side hustles to feel better, and the 2 days out of the 7 that are free are usually filled with obligations. You have no time, and in the blink of an eye, it's past. Story 17. More adherence to morals. I don't try to say others don't have morals, but both poor and rich usually care less because the prior think there is no point, or they have to make it. The latter can just get away with anything and stay in their one bubble if they want to. It can be something like stealing money from your job, kind of sympathetic from the poor if they need to, and embezzlement from the rich. Most middle-class workers would not even think of doing that, or something like racism with the poor becoming neo-Nazis out of frustration, and the rich being in some old country clubs and not outstaying their views because they didn't need to. Or cheating. The middle class is likelier to value lasting marriages and judge cheaters. The middle class often thinks good behavior is separating them from the poor, giving them more class. Story 18. The middles have the ability to live above or below their means. There are usually about 3 levels of anything, from vehicles to kitchen appliances. The richest gravitate towards the plushest, and the poorest can only afford the basics. But the middle can buy the default midline, splurge on the best, or save on the basic models. Story 19. Normalcy. By which I mean there are fewer extremes in either direction. Wealthy people aren't probably flying in economy class, and poor people likely aren't flying in it either because they can't afford to fly at all. Rich people don't have 2.5 kids and the picket fence, nor do poor people. Rich people probably don't have the same thing happen to them every day. Wake up at 8, go to a desk job, come home, eat dinner, because they can randomly decide to do a day trip to Paris on their private jet. Poor people don't usually have the same thing happen to them every day because depending on the level of poverty, they don't know where their next meal is coming from, or because they might have to do a second shift or what have you. Obviously, this answer depends on the level of wealth and poverty discussed, but taken at the extremes, the middle class probably has whatever their society's version of a normal life is most frequently. What are teens today not ready to hear? As you get older, you just keep realizing how dumb you were last year. Every day I realize how stupid I was the day before. I actually like this because it means I'm always improving. The older you get, the faster it goes. Yesterday I was you. Tomorrow you'll be me. One day you'll wake up and wonder where that plenty of time to do X went. It will scare the crap out of you. Pink Floyd said it was perfect. Tired of lying in the sunshine. Staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And then one day, you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. Things will likely take significantly longer to achieve than you think. And getting good at stuff will take time. Sometimes lots of time. And sometimes you'll spend lots of time on something and you still won't get good at it. That's the human experience. Some things you struggle with will come very easily to others, but some things they struggle with will come very easily to you. Don't be mad that someone possesses skills you don't. And don't be a jerk for possessing skills that many other people don't. Also, life is not like a video game where you just keep leveling up. Sometimes what you built will fall apart, and you will have to repeatedly do the same thing over and over. You thought you learned a new useful skill? Guess what? That technology is outdated. You have to once again learn something new. Thought you became physically fit and active? Well, COVID-19 lockdowns hit and you have gained some pounds. Thought you resolved some issues with your family and are on good terms? Well, new issues have popped up. However, don't beat yourself up about it. This is normal, and with experience, you will also become more adept at facing and resolving problems, so each time the same problem repeats, you will be better at solving them. In the adult world, getting into fights doesn't make you look cool, it just makes you look stupid, and one wrong fight can leave your brain damaged or on trial for manslaughter. Putting every aspect of yourself online is unsafe. Nobody needs to know your lists of triggers or your address or your blood type. Some Twitter bios are long enough to be in a Star Wars intro. That's how I'm reading them from now on, with John Williams' score in the background. Maybe I could find one of those sites that generates the title crawl for you with your input. Just because it's new to you doesn't mean it's new. I majored in literature in college. I teach now, and I remember 18 to 20-year-old me being fascinated by how human nature stayed the same from hundreds of years ago. At that age, I couldn't fathom that those old people actually made sex jokes or had certain technologies. Reading across the ages really made me wiser and hip to the fact that humans are basically all the same. We just have different settings that we grow up in. The same thing across the country and cultural lines. I remember when I traveled to India and the culture shock was super jarring. Felt like I had teleported to a different universe. Then, when we were driving around Agra, I saw a group of teenage boys cracking up and pointing. Those people had drawn the most glorious, veiniest peen that I had ever seen on the wall in chalk. Doesn't matter if you live in India, Germany, Egypt, or the USA. Everyone draws and laughs at peens. The great unifier. Being controversial isn't the same as being interesting. Contrarianism isn't wisdom. Those are probably not friends for life. Okay, slim chances for some. This hits hard. Too hard. I lost contact with most of my school friends by now, and I'm only 30. I'm 21 and only talk to one friend I had in high school still. One day, you too will be old and uncool, and it'll happen faster than you think. I used to be with it, then they changed what it was, and what it is now is weird and scary. It'll happen to you. Abe Simpson, more or less. So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. Now to take the ferry cost a nickel, and in those days, nickels had pictures of bumblebees on them. Give me 5 bees for a quarter, you'd say. Now where were we? Oh yeah, the important thing was that I had an onion on my belt, which was the style at the time. They didn't have white onions because of the war. The only thing you could get was those big yellow ones. You're closer to being the older person in any given setting than you think. And by old, I mean like 30. Got nieces and nephews? Just starting kindergarten? Ha! Blink and they're starting college. Agreed. We're having my mother's memorial this coming weekend, and it keeps striking me as bizarre that we are now adults. We went from 15 to 45 in the blink of an eye, it seems. Same. My dad passed a few weeks ago, and we just had his memorial. Seeing his friends and people he worked with that I haven't seen in 30 years just hit me in the face, and how old I am now. Playing music on your speakers in public areas makes you look like a complete douchebag. Nobody likes it but you. The same applies to watching YouTube or TikTok in public spaces. Just get headphones. Also, no one wants to listen to your FaceTime call. Not everybody can be an internet sensation. Somebody has to drive the dump truck. And sanitation is a pretty solid business too. Yeah, don't believe the guidance counselor saying that you have to go to college and then saying something like, "You don't want to be a garbage man or plumber, do you?" The garbage man and the plumber make bank with no student loan debt. Social media is not reality, and your entire life should not revolve around it. I know some adults that need to hear this too. It is perfectly fine to not know something. It's okay to not know. Stop shaming and bullying people because you learned about something before they did. Social media is not the real world, and acting like it is will only make people not want to be around you. We adults are mostly just winging it, hopefully learning from the tons of mistakes that we make, but still winging it. I have no idea where I read it, but I once read a lady talking about her childhood, and she said something like, "I didn't realize when I was little that I was witnessing my parents grow up." It stuck with me both as a parent and as a daughter. In hindsight, the best thing I did as a parent was waiting until well into my 30s to have a kid. I think it's a good idea for people to sort their own lives out before bringing new ones into the world. You didn't invent that style. My high school-age daughter and her entire school look just like my high school did in the mid-90s. They are even listening to the same music. A girl walked past me today in colored baggy mid-high-rise jeans, and I was like, 1993? Is that you? Please shower. Back in my day, you got roasted for being the stinky one. Yeah, teens don't police each other in that way anymore. For the most part, probably a good thing, but in the instance of hygiene, hygiene is for everyone's benefit. To the ones who ride the public bus in my city, specifically, nobody else wants to hear whatever TikTok you're watching. Buy some headphones. My dad's a teenager? Anything less than 80% is not worth listening to. Everything you do as a teenager will be cringe to your children. Everything I did as a teenager is cringe to me. I, a teenager, cringe at myself as I do things. Today's eyebrows are yesterday's clown makeup and tomorrow's regret fodder. Today's eyebrows are laminated. That's so 2010. I know women who've had their eyebrows lasered off and replacements tattooed on. School has a system in place to keep you from falling behind. Life doesn't. Yup, life will run you over if you frick around. And even if you have your crap together, you could be one financial crisis away from losing it all. For sure. Been run over so many times at this point, I've proposed to the asphalt, but still no response. Stop self-diagnosing yourselves with mental illnesses. As a therapist, I second this comment. TikTok is not a valid source of diagnosis. It's just young people without a solid sense of who they are yet, clinging to anything they can. I fully expect they'll grow out of it. Just because you screwed up does not mean you're a screw-up. Building on this, everybody screws up royally at some point. A sign that you're in the right environment, whether that's personally or professionally, will be people forgiving and working with you to get better. The price of rent and housing that they will have to deal with in a few years. My kids are 13 and 15. We live in an old farmhouse, 3,700 square feet. Hope I get that right, 350 square meters. And that's just our living area on the left wing. I try to tell them that back in the day, they had several generations living together. Even if they don't want to live with us, we could build a place for them on the other wing. Think about how much money they would save. I get independence, I had crappy parents, so I moved out at 16. But we're doing all right. Why would they spend all that money just to have their own place? Anyway, would be a treat to have them around even when they grow up. I get how some won't understand, lol. I lived with my parents until I was 21 or 22. I think I'm lucky because I felt like I had freedom and respected boundaries while still saving money. But yeah, I don't ever regret it. More time with family, didn't stress about money, and still lived a full young adult life. You know nothing, and it's okay. You won't feel different when you're older or have kids. You'll just be you. It's weird. Life as a continued experience is weird. When I was much younger, I would always think about all the ways I'd be different when I was older. But I'm still just me. Somewhat wiser and taller, but still the same me I've always been. It's strange, but I think I've enjoyed getting older and growing to know myself better. I might as well be teenage me in a grown-up suit pretending like I'm an adult. That's what it feels like sometimes. Early successes at this stage in your life won't necessarily give you an advantage later, but early failures will likely hold you back significantly. Basically, getting straight A's in high school will leave you closer to the mean than failing a number of classes. To add to this, please, for the love of all that is good in the world, do not get caught up in the legal system or get in trouble with the law. If you're in the US, having a criminal record absolutely will ruin your life, especially if it's a felony. Stay away from drugs, don't drink until you're old enough, and stop doing stupid crap. Focus on schoolwork and hobbies. I know it sounds cliche and even a little bit lame, but take it from someone who prioritized partying at your age and is now struggling to find work because nobody hires felons. I wish I could go back and stay away from that crowd. I'll add to this. Even if you're a good kid, if you hang out with people that are getting into trouble, you will get into trouble as a side effect. An example would be, if you're with friends and they like to fight at some point, the people your friends are fighting with will come after you. Cops just see everyone was fighting and now you have a record. That heartache you're going through, it consumes everything now, but it will be nothing but a footnote in the future. You'll rarely think about it later, and when you do, it won't hurt you. It's hard to hear that your pain isn't the worst in the world when you're feeling it, but it does help to know that it won't mean as much as it does in that moment. As a 35-year-old, I can say this: your social life in high school is meaningless. Do you suck? It doesn't matter. You're popular? Doesn't matter. You will meet new people anyway. You will be 20 and still an empty sheet of paper. Heck, you can start over with 30, probably with 40 and 50 again, and every age in between. It's literally over as soon as you graduate. Nobody will ever care who you were or what you did in high school. Literally nobody. You're not mature for your age. Anyone who says that to justify wanting to be with you is a creep. I would go ahead and say being mature for your age generally, not just being told that to creep on a child. It's actually a bad thing for a kid. Yep, it's often a result of necessity. Abusive or neglectful parents, trauma, and lots of bad things tend to force you to grow up too soon. You need to learn the difference between normal teenage neuroses and mental illness. Neurotypical older teen here, completely agree. People romanticize mental illness and chalk every response they have to a problem up to mental illness. Do you guys know how the attractive and wealthy kids at school seem to just get life handed to them on a silver platter? Get used to it. Justice is not doled out as you want it to. Comeuppance doesn't always come to crap people. In fact, if you're willing to be a cutthroat D-bag, you'll probably make a lot of money. All you need to do is worry about being good. Be good with yourself, try to help others, but now you can't change them or the world at large. That doesn't mean you don't try. I yelled at my mom when she told me to let something go and that it would come back around eventually. Karma is bullcrap. There is no afterlife. The only chance for justice is here and now, because some dude cut in line at Disney. Maybe I was a bit over the top. Maybe. 10 years from now, no one will care about how many viewers you had on TikTok. Also, those 10 years are not a long time. It's tomorrow. Seriously though, it may be the millennial in me, but 2012 feels like last week despite having gone through college, 2 jobs, getting married, and having a child in that time span. It's not your duty to judge others. Just take care of your own crap. Also related, there is a unique emotional reality for each human being in the world. Don't think yours is the only one that matters. And don't let anyone treat you like theirs is the only one that matters. Someone somewhere cares about you deeply and loves to see you be happy. This crap is so true. I told one of my friends that I finally felt like I was at peace with life, and she told me that's something she wanted to hear from me, and that she was proud. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. Social media will give you too much of a superiority complex, and hanging around people who enable you will screw you up later in life. Their children will blame their generation for all their problems. In short, you are the boomers of tomorrow. The boomers destroyed a lot of stuff protecting those who came in after them, all for an economic policy that didn't do what it was intended to do. They're most likely not going to be the one, unless his name is Neo. In 15 years, you're going to think the kids have gone too far, and they're going to think you're old-fashioned. Jobs aren't meant to always be fun or your dream. Sometimes you have to work a job you hate to stay afloat. Likewise, turning a hobby into your job isn't always the best thing. It's often a terrible idea because it makes you hate your hobby. Your metabolism won't last forever. Practice and develop healthy exercise and diet habits now before it gets harder and with more consequences later. I'm just about to turn 30 in a couple of weeks. I am 100 pounds heavier than I was in high school. To be fair, I was super tall and skinny to the point of being slightly underweight, and that's after losing 25 pounds since the start of July. I have high blood pressure and elevated cholesterol. I am a father of a 2-year-old that doesn't want to die in the 40 to 60 range. I also want to live as a good example to her. Another 35 pounds and I'll reevaluate what my body type is like and reset my goals from there. That would be 240 pounds, which I was about 4 years ago, but it would also be a more muscular, trimmed 240. I'll determine where in the 210 to 240 range I want to end up and what my body and lifestyle will be like. Running is still hard, but using an elliptical is easier on the knees than it was 25 pounds ago. I want to eventually be able to do the Broad Street Run, 10 miles through Philadelphia, even though I hate running. If my knees don't like it, I'll do something else as an equivalent. As an added bonus, my sex drive I think is improving, but nowhere near what it was when I was in the 220 to 250 range. I don't think it's 100% related, but maybe it's more than 50%. I told a 20-something-year-old this because he was complaining about some weight gain recently. He was blown away. High school won't last forever. Thank God. Yep, I remember being a freshman and thinking, God, I can't wait till this is over. Not everyone needs to go to college. High school is probably the easiest thing you'll do. In addition, not everyone needs to go to college right after high school. Take some time off, join the workforce, travel, party, build a social group, figure out who you are, and then go to college. It will always be there, but you're only young once, and if you go with a bit of life experience under your belt, you'll probably have a better idea of what you want from it. As a teen just entering uni, this is exactly what I told my dad, and he insisted I go straight to uni. So might not just be teens that need to hear it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Cut back on the sugary crap now. Take care of your teeth now. Start working out now. You don't have to be a bodybuilder and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just be active. Now is the time to get out and do a bunch of crazy crap, but at the same time, remember that whatever you do now, you pay for 20 years later somehow, some way. And this can be taken in a good way or a bad way. Don't want to take care of your teeth now? Have fun dropping $30,000 on your teeth like I had to. Not exercising or eating right? Have fun with that quadruple bypass that my father just had. My girlfriend's parents are older than my parents, but because they do those things, they haven't had nearly as many hospital visits as my parents have. By comparison, my parents are falling apart and they're only in their 50s. My girlfriend's parents are in their 70s and objectively are healthier. The big difference? Early in the morning, every morning, those two are downstairs working out, hitting the weights and machines for a solid hour or two. Do you want to speed and act like a damn fool on the road? Have fun when you have to pay your own insurance and nobody wants to insure you drive a Honda Civic for no less than $350 like me. Even my car. It was my dream car, and it still is the car I would be driving today if I had just taken care of the goddamn thing, but no, it started leaking oil and I didn't keep up with it or take it in. And now I have to drive a goddamn Civic, when I used to drive a Lexus. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You're not supposed to create a safe space to isolate yourself from everything that triggers you. You're supposed to expose yourself in controlled ways so you can improve your coping skills. Yep, often avoidance and isolation can actually make your anxiety around that trigger worse because you're exposing yourself more to your own thoughts and detaching from reality. You're not as important as you think you are, but also plenty of people do notice when you are not at your best, and some of them do remember. The whole no one is thinking about you or looking at you bit isn't universal. The world doesn't care about your feelings as much as you do. On the positive side, no one remembers that embarrassing moment that is burned into your memory. Everything in your life right now is a trial run. High school is meant to teach you how to learn, how to communicate, and how to deal with other people. That's it. High school doesn't last forever, and it doesn't really mean anything. You most likely won't marry whoever you're dating right now, and that's okay. Most romantic relationships you have will probably fail because you are young, and you are both learning how to communicate, and figuring out what you want or need in a relationship. Enjoy this time of awkward growth. It's the last time you'll be able to be a kid, and not have to worry about adult issues. Unless you're unlucky and were dealt a crap hand in life, be humble, patient, and kind. I'm rooting for you. I don't know how to explain it, but that backhanded thing they do where they use sarcasm disguised as a compliment is bullying. I really have no idea how to explain exactly what I'm talking about. I especially see it online and mostly on apps like TikTok. It's almost always aimed at someone who looks or acts weird. I think a lot of teens don't see it as bullying because it's not very obvious. My younger sister started doing it, but at the same time, she's the type to advocate for victims of bullying. Pissed her off when I told her that she is a bully. Is it comments that seem supportive like, OMG, what a skinny legend / absolute unit, we could never, but it turns out that they were trying to shame them for being thin or fat? You're probably not going to get to play video games for a living. Social media isn't real. I feel sad for the people who grew up after Facebook existed. You are allowed to make mistakes. The consequences of nicotine will catch up one day. Every time I see a teenager vaping, I consider becoming a respiratory doctor slightly more. Wear earplugs at concerts. Seriously, loud music is great, but so is being able to hear when you're 30. Adults know exactly what you're going through. Just because it's the first time you've felt something doesn't mean you're the first. Also, we aren't making you do things because we get off on your plight. We actually want you to feel happy and satisfied all the time if that means we get some quiet time. But always getting your way can make others around you worse off, and it can make you grow up to be a bad adult. Parenting is a 24-hour job. You being forced to spend a few hours away from your friends will gain you no sympathy. You are probably never going to be able to retire, yet the older generation doesn't understand why and blames it on lack of knowledge. Social media and messaging are not a substitute for in-person socialization. You are all grossly under-socialized, and it's going to negatively affect your development and social skills for the rest of your life. I'm well aware. It's okay to be ignorant of something. Being ignorant is acceptable. Stop putting others down and bullying them because you discovered something before they did. People won't want to be around you if you behave like social media is the real world, because it isn't. Happiness is a skill. Some never learn it. This is very true. Happiness is an internal thing. All the noise of the world is constantly telling us, you can't be happy unless you have insert some goal or product here, that many spend their whole lives chasing what they were told to chase and not being happy. They are not the main character in anyone's story apart from their own. It's normal to be anxious, and feeling a small amount of anxiety is healthy. It means you care. Spending your whole life avoiding anxiety is avoiding all the things which make life worthwhile. You aren't oppressed. You aren't disadvantaged. You probably aren't mentally ill. Your problems are laughably small in the grand scheme of history. You live in the most privileged and prosperous time in human history. Yes, even if you are from a so-called disadvantaged group, you are still more privileged than most would have been a century ago. There's an overwhelmingly good chance that whatever problems you think you have would be dwarfed by those of your grandparents' generation. Many problems of today's youth wouldn't even have registered as a problem mere decades ago. Many of today's teens couldn't function properly in the world a mere 30 years ago with how soft they are. If you really want to be happy, start learning to find gratitude and gratefulness in what you have. Count your blessings. I'm sick of hearing how awful teenagers think they have it. If high school is too hard for you, then God help you when you're out in the real world and can't have mommy and daddy fix all of your problems for you. Literally every generation has crapped on the younger ones with how hard it was when I was growing up. We've heard it quite frequently, thanks. You're exactly the same as every other generation since teenagers were invented. Putting up videos of yourself dancing on TikTok will be humiliating in the next few years. It's all fun now, but wait until maturity kicks in. Dating anyone older than 18 is not a good choice. I understand that not everyone likes dating someone their age, but being under 18, it's best to date someone your age than to date someone older. Don't believe older men who say, "You're so mature for your age," as justification to date. What do you wish Hollywood would stop doing? Making it impossible to hear the dialogue. This is a problem with everyone I know. I think there will be a time when people look back at movies and say, this movie must have been made between 2010 and 2025, because you can't hear a damn thing anyone is saying. There is absolutely nothing wrong with my hearing, but I need closed captions on everything I watch now. Having a main character whose job or income level does not match their home or lifestyle at all. Working at a fast food joint? Better have an apartment with great furniture all to yourself in Upper East Side Manhattan, and every time they have ice cream, it's Ben & Jerry's. Milking everything dry. When did they release Ice Age 6? They kinda already did. Scenes that are too dark to actually see. If I wanted to listen to a show, I'd download an audiobook. Thank you. That is my biggest pet peeve as well. Especially prevalent in horror films. Yes, I get it's supposed to be dark and scary, but honestly, you can't see anything. Not true. If there is any form of light in your house, you will see yourself in the reflection of your TV. Spoiling the film in the trailers. The worst one I saw was Batman v Superman, where they give away in the trailers that Batman and Superman join up at the end to fight a common enemy. Completely did away with any mystery of how such a rivalry would be resolved. Still not as bad as Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where they show Arnold being on the good side. Whispering or mumbling dialogue, then cutting to a chase scene, dramatic posing close-ups. Quiet dialogue which makes you crank the volume up so you can hear it better, then a super loud action scene happens and the speakers to your TV explode. Showing incorrect CPR. Shocking someone without a heart rhythm. Just do what the AED tells you to do. No thinking required. Forcing a love story that makes no sense in a movie that has nothing to do with romance. Why can't they just be friends? Why is platonic friends a just? Platonic friends should be valued more. Adapting crap into live-action movies where they should really be animated. Examples include upcoming Mega Man, Pac-Man, and Minecraft movies, which are all set to be live-action. How do you make a live-action, ghost-hunting, sentient piece of cheese? Messing up the sound mix so that we have to constantly adjust the volume for music and dialogue. On my Roku TV, there is an option called sound leveling. I can actually watch stuff now without constantly having to adjust the volume. It's a handy feature, but it wouldn't be necessary if they stopped screwing up the sound mix. And what makes me even angrier is when they screw this up in a series. You guys know people are going to watch this on their home TV, and yet you are still doing this. All great answers, but what I've seen lately is just a lot of wacky decision-making. There are multiple video game adaptation movies and TV shows coming out lately that missed the mark completely. Resident Evil, Halo, etc. I know adaptations always have their quirks and things that would outrage a fanbase, but geez. The Halo TV show really felt like they just wanted to write their own story with already existing characters. It all comes down to an executive decision. I just wish the creators have more control over their projects, instead of having execs with no creative abilities suggesting, maybe you should make the super soldier get out of his augmented power armor and instead just fight naked. Also make him want to bang the enemy like Romeo and Juliet. The showrunner was quoted as saying, "We, writers, didn't look at the games." He has obviously backtracked on and said that it was taken out of context, and they did play the games previously. This means they did know the story and still screwed it up. Not sure what is worse. They could have literally let each game level be its own episode, and that would have made such an amazing series. You can make new characters and still keep the old story points intact. Write a compelling story between some of the nameless NPC soldiers, while also hitting the story marks of the games with the existing characters. Characters getting punched multiple times in the face in one scene and having no signs of the trauma in the next scene. Or shot, but they remove the bullet in a dirty motel and sew it up with twine and knitting needles, so now it doesn't hurt anymore and they can go fight more bad guys unencumbered. Not Hollywood, I guess, but in Frasier, the father got shot in the leg or something and now needs physical therapy and walks with a cane for life. This may sound ridiculous, but here it is. I cannot stand characters who are driving and talking to a passenger but not watching the road. They think the same courtesy rules of eye contact apply, even when you are a conservant behind the wheel. You're driving a vehicle. Watch the road, not the person to whom you're talking. Bonus points if the scene is in a city setting, especially if it's New York. You'd think they'd encounter at least one red light or person crossing the road. I said once on a different thread, I'd love to see someone do an edit where they add sound effects like horns blaring, crashing, thuds, people screaming. Pretty sure there was a scene like this either in one of the Airplane movies or one of the Naked Gun movies. Pretty sure it was a movie with Leslie Nielsen though. Making movies where the one good guy defeats 20 bad guys because the 20 bad guys attack the one good guy one by one. When I watch these fight scenes nowadays, I ignore the main fight and just look at the other bad guys waiting their turn. It's hilarious. They strike weird poses, fall over themselves just to writhe around like zombies. Some recent movies try to avoid this by closing in on the fight itself, which usually makes things even more confusing and incoherent. Casting attractive people in ugly roles. Like when the obviously gorgeous person gets a makeover. For 15 years, I've wondered what exactly was ugly about Ugly Betty. Oh, she has braces and glasses. Must be hideous. Stop having people take like one bite of what they ordered and then leave. It's a small thing, but I've never seen it happen in real life. Or worse, order something when they just intend to talk to someone there for a couple of minutes and then leave when the food arrives. Who pays for it? Sometimes they'll take a wad of cash and throw it on the table without seeing a bill or even checking how much money they're putting down. Empty cups. I hate seeing people holding cups and pretending to take drinks from obviously empty cups. Their hands never move right, or if it's an open cup, you can literally see that it's empty. Like, at least add water so they have weight. You don't even actually have to put coffee or something in them. Literally water with food coloring will do, to make it appear to be a different drink or whatever. Remakes of good movies. I don't understand why they remake good movies when there are tons of flops that have potential that they could remake. Like, there was absolutely no need to remake Total Recall. It's an iconic movie, but something like Aragon or The Golden Compass, those should get remakes. Sequels, prequels, remakes, reimaginings, reboots, etc. I 100% agree. Unless they take the Brady route and lampoon the original. Unfortunately, Top Gun, Maverick, I'm sure unleashed a whole new bunch that were on the fence about putting into production. We are farther in time from the Brady movie than the Brady movie was from the show. Pretending people can actually have a conversation in a bar without yelling. As an addition, when two people find a nice bar late at night, completely empty by coincidence, and talk over whiskey, the only bar you're finding empty at night is Greasy Frank's bar in the slums of Chicago. Putting CGI first rather than the story. CGI should be there to back up practical effects, not the other way around. This is why Fury Road was so great. Treating child stars like crap. I was watching a YouTube video about Dan Schneider. Apparently Nickelodeon chose Florida to film their shows because of the lack of child labor laws. They also purposefully chose kids whose parents were more likely to be absent or neglectful so they could control the kids more. Like, what? Female action stars that fight in high heels. And put your hair in a ponytail, for crying out loud. No one wants hair on their face during a fight. This is my biggest thing. I grew up with waist-length hair, and there was no way I was doing any athletic activities without pulling my hair back. I was so happy when they had Moana pull her hair back every time she needed to focus. Much more realistic. The endless attempts at creating universes. Please stop. Not only Hollywood, individual stories are fine. Not everything needs to be connected into a single narrative. The parts I did not like from some of the Asimov books were precisely the parts that try to retcon previous works into a single boring narrative. I wish Hollywood would stop treating the medium of animation as something inherently inferior to live action. I also wish 2D animation was used for more movies. I completely agree. There's a unique magic in hand-drawn animation. I'd even appreciate a mix of 2D and 3D, or animation and live action. Mixing 2D and 3D is dope. I've seen it in a music video, and added to fast-paced editing, made everything so dynamic and cohesive, I really wish it was a thing in more movies and TV series. Also, in a recent MCU series, it has been done, but I don't remember which one because I haven't watched it. Using that sandy brown filter on Middle Eastern cities, and Mexico. Like, come on. But how else are we supposed to know these are desolate places that are probably awful to live in? Oh wow, lady, you're surprisingly good at punching and shooting and hunting, anything other than sewing. Thanks, I grew up with 14 brothers. Also, when a guy is actually respectful to women, it's because he had sisters. Casting 20-somethings to play teenagers and then constantly putting them in sexual situations. For all the silly and not so silly reasons why, it always bugs me how so much media, and not just media for teens, media for adults, is about unsupervised high schoolers played by 20-somethings drinking and committing a crime, but very little media is set in college at all. It would eliminate a lot of the weirdness. Why do they all have huge houses with pools, unlimited alcohol, no parents, tons of money, and no jobs? Like, that's not even possible. I met a few kids with absent parents, but the way Euphoria and other shows depict high school parties is absurd. Lately, so many movies are dark scene. Watching old movies, I can actually see what's going on. In a lot of new movies, I can barely discern what the heck is going on. It could be daytime in the scene, and it feels like nighttime. Also, I can't hear crap anymore in movies. They're loud mumbling. I agree. So many movies take a fantasy setting and think, let's make it dark. Why not give the movies the colors they deserve? People like colors. Usually you do dark scenes to cover up bad CGI. Not that it's an excuse for anything. Casting the same 10 actors in everything. Let's get some new blood in there. No matter how talented they are, once an actor reaches a certain point, I only see them and not their character. When I watched Jojo Rabbit, I thought of Roman Griffin Davis and Thamazen McKenzie as Jojo and Elsa. Scarlett Johansson was just Scarlett Johansson, Dwayne Johnson. Inserting romance in movies or shows that don't need it. Not every guy and gal that meet on screen have to end up together. Despite what PUAs might say, they can just be friends. And how about romance between two characters who appear to have zero chemistry and no attraction to each other? Remaking everything over and over. Please let people write new stories. I don't mind the idea of remakes, but Hollywood should remake movies that flopped or were otherwise underwhelming. They shouldn't remake masterpieces. Manos, The Hand of Fate could be a good story. The execution of it, though. Shaky cam action fight scenes. No, this is not artistic. Your choreography just sucks and you have to hide it. I especially love shaky cam in non-action fight scenes. Just why? Like Liam Neeson jumping a fence. Casting 35-year-olds as high schoolers. Can we add casting 16 to 18-year-olds to play 11-year-olds? Priya Ferguson was 16 when she played 11-year-old Erica Sinclair in Stranger Things Season 4. Glamorizing mental illness. It sucks and is difficult to live with. Did you know autism makes you a mega genius? I wish. Mine just makes me weird and lonely. Making all the explosions and sound effects 100 times louder than the dialogue. The same movies over and over again. I have no problem with story structures being similar, but when we are on our 10th Predator movie and 11th Fast and Furious and 200th Marvel project, it just starts to get the same and boring. Similarly, remaking movies that have no need of being remade. Generally, this means dumbing down dialogue, adding some stupid side story, or swapping animation for live action, or vice versa. Leave great movies alone and come up with some original new ideas. Stop recreating bad versions of good classic movies. Stop using spectacular CGI to distract from a subpar plot. I'm looking at you, Disney. I always wondered what it would be like if people chose to remake bad stuff and make it better. It seems more logical. Making women perfect all the time. I don't want to see a post-apocalyptic world or a safari adventure where the women have their makeup done, hairstyled, and armpits shaved. It's incredibly unrealistic, but then again, so is everything else. All the guys look like mountain men, but the women look like supermodels on their off days. Medical shows without consulting medical people. Same here, but with lawyers. So frustrating. Are you telling me you can't read an entire document in 3 seconds before declaring this will never hold in court? Casting really well-known good-looking actors as voice actors. Why not hire someone that might have a harder time getting lead roles in live-action movies? The name of the A-list actors, as well as their recognized voices, goes far towards selling movies. It's basically all about the bottom line. Animation and live-action movies are expensive to make. Voice acting is a skill on its own, though. Where a screen actor has the skill to portray emotion and depth through body language and expressions, a voice actor can do that through their voice. It's not mutually exclusive, but I find it a shame that animation gigs are given to famous screen actors. Protecting predators. Finally, this answer should be repeated by everyone all the time. Just hanging up after a phone conversation without saying goodbye pisses me off for some reason, and agreeing to go on a date with someone and just leaving without exchanging a time or location. How does Saturday sound? Oh, Saturday is perfect. Great, see you then. Depicting allergies and asthma as nerdy, all-in-your-head conditions that a person can outgrow through confidence and personal will. First thing that comes to mind is Cobra Kai. Johnny just went, throw that crap away. Asthma does not exist in this dojo. And Miguel just doesn't have asthma, though it can be sort of explained away as Miguel training hard lessened the symptoms. The point, though, is that Johnny is an idiot. And yeah, like you said, from what I understand, certain conditioning can lessen symptoms. Reboots and sequels. Come up with something new, especially quit with making substandard remakes of successful non-English language films. Market the originals and trust people to be able to follow subtitles instead of producing plastic knockoffs. Having dialogue you can barely hear, so you turn the sound up only for it to be followed by explosions or super dramatic music that rattles your speakers and eardrums. Creepy, controlling, manipulative, stalkerish behavior is presented as romantic. Just no. Making them rich and gorgeous does not make it okay either. Female characters who are kick-ass good or kick-ass evil usually have the sole motivation of some man done her wrong. CGI is not a replacement for a strong story, engaging character development, and good actors. It's like getting a pretty gift box on your birthday and finding out that there's actually no gift inside. Redirect some of the budget towards substance rather than style. Characters hanging from one hand. Extra points if they're holding someone with the other hand. That's impossible, especially if they fell 100 feet and then caught that branch, right? It's always in suboptimal situations, swinging from a helicopter or after taking a bullet, never in the comfort of your living room after a solid breakfast. Shoehorning queer characters into storylines just to educate straight audiences about queer culture. I want to see more queer characters whose identity doesn't serve the plotline or do it in an organic way. Example of good representation, in my opinion, Sense8. Y'all can keep it representation, in my opinion, atypical. This, but for any underrepresented group. Have a 25-year-old actress play the love interest to a 50-year-old man. They keep the men as love interests up into their dotage, but they keep asking for younger and younger women as their counterparts. Roger Moore quit his role as James Bond because of this. He kept getting older, but his female co-stars stayed the same age over the years, and he realized how absurd it was. Sex scenes in movies and shows that don't need it. Thanks for the 20 seconds of discomfort sitting next to a family member or friend or stranger for half-undressed people making out against a door to show us that they're in a relationship. If seeing them half-naked for 20 seconds doesn't advance the plot, I would prefer some actually thought-out plot and dialogue. Thanks. They just don't go far enough. The world is ready for full penetration in a blockbuster. And then he smells crime again. He's out busting heads. Then he's back to the lab for some more full penetration. Smells crime, back to the lab. Full penetration. Crime, penetration. Crime, full penetration. Crime, penetration. And this goes on and back and forth for 90 or so minutes until the movie just sort of ends. Only focusing on sexual relations. Most movies never focus on two normal friends. It always has to include hot and steamy sex for some reason. That's why kids shows work really well, because most children's shows don't have relationships that include more than just friends. Like in Avatar, though they give hints that Aang and Katara like each other, they make them out to just be friends, until the finale, of course. Aang crushes on Katara for most of the show, and the development of their relationship into a romance does have moments before the finale, the cave, for one. Avatar is a terrible example of what OP is looking for. It's explicitly cast as a romantic interest, albeit in a TVY7 way, from minute one of them being on screen together. The cave episode, the fortune teller episode, the Day of Black Sun, all have pretty explicit references to Aang's romantic interest. Casting middle-aged women to play elderly women, just making their hair white. Casting late 20s or early 30s women to play middle-aged women and just dressing them up in frumpy clothes. Casting late 20s actors to play high school students. Hollywood considers any women over 25 to be elderly. The new trend is where you show this cool built-up team for them to die immediately. Trope made in the last couple of years, already overplayed. Except in Deadpool 2, that was hilarious. I agree with what people posted about sound leveling for music versus quiet conversations and other comments made. My addition is two things I don't think were posted. Stop using the Wilhelm scream in movies, because sometimes it doesn't even match the scene. Stop using tell over show. Sometimes movies exposition dump when they could just trust the audience to reason it out themselves. The whole point of pictures is to show the audience through cinematic storytelling. Countdowns to teen actresses turning 18. Let the paint dry a bit there, bud. I agree. I remember back in the day when guys used to wait for Emma Watson to turn 18, so it wouldn't be weird if they wanted to bang her. I mean, couldn't they hear themselves and what they were actually saying? Having all the characters be some type of trendy creative professional or generic upscale office worker. Like, can I get some shows with normal middle class or poor people in them? Can't a bartender or an electrician fall in love too? Too much CGI. Hire the freaks, athletes, and outliers. Hollywood has outsourced any real skill or talent to a computer program. Now they just hire pretty faces who can't even begin to do a stunt. Acting must be super hard against a green screen. I guess I just want them to be more authentic and use real talented people instead of some fake-ass CGI. Misrepresenting autism as a whole. It's a spectrum, yes, but as an autistic person, it feels like they never do it right. Weirdly, Abed was pretty correct to me, including the stuff about having a hard time with tying shoes, analog clocks, and telling left from right. I also 100% imitated TV characters constantly as a kid. I am trying to wipe this from my memory. So Abed is oddly correct. Rain Man and that guy from Ready Player One are not. Hyping up PR relationships. Not just fake romantic relationships, but also using joking comments made in one interview as though it's actually dissatisfaction and criticism. It gets back around to colleagues, like so-and-so thinks the show is trash. These are workplaces. Lazy entertainment media gets engagement by disrupting professionalism. They love making coworkers hate each other for nothing. My coworkers love to play this game, where they grab the most innocuous book off of my shelves and demand that it be banned. I have them come up with a reason why it should plausibly be banned in the United States. If we were in the entertainment industry, this would get reported as a legitimate assault on civil liberties by the very people who are supposed to safeguard them. It would destroy the camaraderie. Take Stranger Things. Millie Bobby Brown jokingly said that she wished the Duffer Brothers killed people off like Game of Thrones. For a good month, the story was that she thought the show was soft, the Duffer Brothers were cowards, etc. The press dragged the Duffer Brothers into this, trying to drive a wedge between them because of a joke. If they didn't get along so well, I could imagine this derailing the show completely. Unusually beautiful people everywhere. Can we get some movies with average-looking people, please? You can be funny-looking and be a total magnet. Rom-com movies. They're all the same. The movie starts off showcasing a man and a woman's life, then they meet up in some unexpected way. They don't expect to get along, then they do. But then before the final act, a misunderstanding happens and they break up. But at the end of the movie, they're all happy again. Those movies are so predictable, they should just stop making them. Forcing ideas or characters into the movies and shows which are adapted from a book. I really have a problem when they outright change the original work, just for the sake of pleasing some lunatics or some crazy minorities. I hope you understand what I mean. Acting like if a woman's water breaks, she needs to rush to the hospital because delivery is imminent. The reason for that isn't because she is giving birth right away after the water breaks. It's the possibility of a prolapsed umbilical cord. My son nearly died from this. Telling ordinary citizens that they shouldn't have guns while making movies about extreme violence, attending and throwing galas with extreme armed security, and living in gated communities with armed guards protecting them. Marvel and DC. Hollywood can only make a handful of big action movies every year because they don't want too much competition on any given weekend. How many awesome movies didn't get made because Marvel wanted to make Ant-Man 7, the search for more money? I want more movies and shows about people of all ages, especially people over 50. It's an issue that rarely is considered when talking about the lack of diverse stories. Additionally, Hollywood too often casts older men with younger women as romantic interests. Regardless of the narrative, most everyone I know dates or marries people close to their own age. Try British programming, it's often a breath of fresh air. Using Kevin Hart, The Rock, and Ryan Reynolds in every damn thing. I put on movies with those actors when I want to put on a movie without feeling any obligation to pay attention. Women living in post-apocalyptic hellscapes and have shaved armpits and legs as well as flawless makeup. Casting male and female leads who are decades apart. It just looks silly. It's getting worse, too. I've seen many movies where the romantic lead is in his 60s and his leading lady is in her 30s, and they have a young family. It looks awkward and silly. It also costs good female actresses work. This appeals to the men in their 60s demographic, I'm sure. But what about the rest of us? You know a guy doesn't have to be gay in order to be friends with a female character. Obvious empty cups, suitcases, and boxes. Casting 25-year-old women in mother roles when they wouldn't have a 16-year-old kid, for example. Make sure you use protection. Mom, I'm 14. Yes, dear, and I'm 28. Casting the same nepotism actors and actresses. They should give other people who actually had to work hard to get into the industry a chance. Promoting the Green Initiative while all the A and B listers fly private jets all over the world. How is it they promote cut emissions but run up so many millions of emissions themselves? Writing about crap they have no idea about and then making it into a TV show or movie. Please no more military or cop shows. NCIS is a disgrace. Also, no one is poor. Even two broke girls have a nice apartment. It's just not realistic at all. I think what the writers don't get is that when they write about things or people they don't know about, they are condescending and insulting to them. Please just stop. What's a name brand item you refuse to replace with a generic? Crayola crayons. Generic tastes funny. Must be a Marine. This is a list of post-apocalyptic high-value trades. Stock up now before it's too late. Post-its. All knockoffs don't stick. They are horrible. A lot of quality in 3M products in general from my perspective, and it's in so much you don't even know. Airplane, we make a tape that literally holds wings together. Teeth, we make a toothpaste and a buttload of stuff for fillings and crowns. Phones, we make films that you will never see unless you break your phone in half. Medical tech, we make things that they stick to you for EKGs and measuring your vitals. Oh, and N95 masks, which until the pandemic, the company store would basically give them away for like 10 for $1. Lego. No rivals have comparable quality, including the quality of satisfaction when someone accidentally steps on them. Ah yes, the Lego brand Caltrops. Evidently, it's not trademarked anymore, but trampoline used to be a brand name. Even if it weren't, I'd refuse to call them rebound tumblers. Data storage. If I lose years of photographs, it will be because of my own negligence, not because I saved $8 on an SD card. Don't save all your photographs in one place. If it's too important to lose, it's too important to have in only one medium. This. I back up photos in 4 places. Also a professional photographer. I lost all of my oldest child's pictures of his first, other than what was posted on social media, to a hard drive crashing. I won't make that mistake again. This is pretty specific, but Scotch commercial grade packing tape. The Uline tape is terrible. Also duct tape. The only other one that can compare is Gorilla Tape. Gaff tape is better, but I ain't trying to go broke on tape. Q-tip. I've tried others and they suck. Then I'm stuck with like 2,000 crappy cotton swabs. Yeah, Q-tip is a guarantee of quality. I've had a few good generics, but way more crap generics. Anything with a hollow plastic tube can just GTFO. Yeah, screw those plastic core ones. If I wanted to use a wet noodle, I would. Nilla wafers. The off-brand versions tend to be flavored differently and they leave a funny aftertaste. I've never had off-brand Nilla wafers because the original is just the best. I will say, maybe an unpopular opinion, but I like them when they're stale. They are softer, but still have a delicious taste. Mini Nilla wafers are bomb as hell too. Growing up black? Well, I'm still black, but I also grew up black. I used to notice my white and Asian friends' houses would smell so good on laundry day. My house never smelled like that. Come to find out, pretty much all of my friends and family use Tide. At my house, we used some cheap generic stuff. So somehow in my childlike brain, I started to connect Tide with success. It wasn't until my late 20s that I finally got a job where I can easily afford the way more expensive Tide brands, and to this day it's all I buy. Smells like nostalgia. This gave me a good chuckle. Reminded me of Mitch Hedberg. I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to, too. 3M command strips. Do you know what 3M stands for? Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. Their products are in everything. Do they just own Minnesota? I would love to find out who manufactures the napkins sold to places like Domino's so I could then order a nuclear strike on their factories. I don't understand the purpose of napkins that don't work as napkins. I get about 784 of them every time that I order pizza, and their only use is to soak up liquid. They don't work for wiping hands or any other surface. In a pinch, you could probably use the edge of one as a blade. Go to Spain. Try a napkin. I'm convinced their economy sucks because their napkins are so crappy. It's essentially wax paper. Total waste of resources. Dawn dish soap. It's just good and really not that expensive. I've used Blue Dawn to take old oil stains out of concrete. Many people mentioned Hellmann's mayo, Heinz ketchup, and beans. Kick 'em in soy sauce. Here's one I haven't seen. Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. Absolutely no substitute. Lee & Perrins makes a great steak sauce as well. It is all I will use. Tampons. I'm a cheap bastard most of the time, but if something's gonna be jammed up my fun hole for hours at a time, it better be of the utmost quality. Same with pads. All the cheap store brand stuff is too cottony and basically adheres to you like a scab. Always or suffer. For real, I once got some crappy off-brand in a pinch and paid a fortune for a tiny box because uni pharmacy. I had no pads with me and needed to replace mine like 10 minutes before. They were absolutely awful. So scratchy and irritated my skin. I'd have fared better with toilet-based undergarment mummification. As much as I hated the waste of money, I threw them in the trash where they belonged. Glad garbage bags. Have bought cheap ones, sucked my body weight in the ass. Dawn dish soap. You use so much less. M&M's. Knockoffs have the wrong chocolate to coating ratio or their chocolate isn't as good. I like M&M's, but I also enjoy Smarties. Canadian Smarties, not Rockets, which is what Americans call Smarties. Canadian Smarties. I will always go for Smarties over M&M's. Also Crayola crayons, markers, colored pencils. I'm all for the store's private label options in other areas. However, the off-brand art products are crumbly and produce mediocre results. Cheez-Its. Screw you, Cheese Nips. I made that mistake once. Hoi Fong Sriracha. Sriracha isn't trademarked, and some knockoffs even have roosters and Chinese text on the bottle, so you have to know the brand name to find the good one. Earlier this year, there was a shortage, and my parents bought 4 bottles of the fake stuff. Tried it, and it wasn't the same at all. Hoi Fong trademarking Sriracha is like Heinz trademarking the word ketchup. I don't think they can trademark an entire sauce category that they didn't invent. Hoi Fong's founder is from Vietnam. The sauce originated in Thailand. Sriracha got famous, but that's not the only product Hoi Fong makes. They also have sambal oelek, which they can't trademark either because it's an Indonesian spicy sauce. Holy balls, this blows up. More fun facts. The third sauce in Hoi Fong's lineup is their chili garlic sauce, also labeled as Tuong Ot Toi Vietnam, translated as Vietnam chili garlic sauce. Basically, they have sauces traced to Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. The chili peppers used in their sauces changed around 2017 when they got into a dispute with the farm that supplied 80 to 90% of their peppers. Some people say they can taste the difference. That ranch, Underwood, now sells its own sriracha, which makes you wonder if it tastes like pre-2017 Hoi Fong products. If you like these hot sauces, I invite you to visit large Asian supermarkets in your area. They usually have an entire aisle filled with dozens of chili pepper products. It can be overwhelming the first time around, so a little research before a visit would be helpful. Americans are lucky that today we have access to chili sauces from entire Asia if we know where to look. It's a good way to expand your culinary experiences, for not much money because sauces are cheap. I love sambal oelek and their chili garlic sauce at least as much as their sriracha. Bic lighters, because last time I bought some cheap generic lighters on a 2 for the price of 1 deal at the gas station, one of them blew up when I lightly tossed it onto my coffee table, and the other exploded in my hand, and I don't know how or why I wasn't seriously injured by that. Just dumb luck, I guess. Bic lighters are better quality than the generics, and I've never ever had one explode like that. Exploding lighters is scary AF, and I don't need that kind of excitement in my life. Not sure if you can source them in your area, but Clipper makes some good lighters. They're reusable, easily serviceable, and pretty good quality. Clippers are the perfect middle ground between Zippo and Bic. Refillable, fluid and flint, but still cheap enough that I don't feel bad tossing one. Sharpie, not the dollar store brand Skirple? I thought I imagined Skirple. Kerrygold butter. I always wondered what the American obsession with Kerrygold butter was, but then I saw American butter and instantly understood. Guess we're just lucky that all of our butter is very similar to Kerrygold. If you ever get the chance to, try good Channel Island Jersey butter. It kicks Kerrygold up and down the street. One of the few perks of living on the Isle of Man is the extremely high quality of dairy products, all kinds. I don't know what ancient witchcraft the Manx dairy producers are into, but the butter and especially the cheese there is just so ridiculously good. Premium brand saltine crackers. All other brands pale in comparison. Off-brands are always stale. Ziploc bags. All the generics I've tried have super crappy seals that are extremely difficult to snap into place, and they are weak as hell, just not the ones with zippers. I want to know it's sealed by mashing the threads together. As somebody with arthritis, I will only buy the ones with zippers. What a lifesaver. Not really a brand name, but I stopped using supermarket bacon after trying it from a butcher. I've found generally supermarket bacon shrivels up to a ridiculously small size. I'm guessing they inject it with water to make it weigh more. The bacon I get at the butcher's basically stays the same size and tasted much nicer. I know it's not something everyone can afford, but I eat bacon pretty rarely, so it's a nice treat when I do. I started smoking my own bacon, and it kind of ruined store-bought bacon for me. I started smoking my own bacon, and it kind of ruined tobacco for me. Higher calorie density than cigarettes, though. Post-it notes, and practically anything else made by 3M. 3M is S tier. Basically every product they have is the best version of that product. Except for earplugs. Ticonderoga pencils. All the other ones don't hold up to intense note jotting. Philadelphia cream cheese. The other brands are always gluey. Guar gum or some kind of stabilizing gum that makes them so many more times worse than Philly. Doritos. Making generic Doritos should be a crime. They make generic Doritos? Clancy's does, and they taste so bad. Pop-Tarts. Every other off-brand doesn't even taste similar. I'm a toaster strudel man myself. Pop-Tarts are a passable snack. Toaster strudels are a legit tasty treat. Always night pads. Nothing else can suck up that much blood that quickly. On the other end, pun intended, I prefer original Aquafresh toothpaste in taste over all the others. At the other end, I thought you were gonna say Preparation H. Charmin. I prefer Ultra Soft, but Ultra Strong is suitable. Ultra Soft crumbles. Ultra Strong doesn't, so I get Strong, but I seem to remember another soft Charmin that didn't crumble. Something like a Soft Plus. Yup, Ultra Soft is just begging for a ticket to Dingleberry City. Anything by Newman's Own. I am happy to support their business if their proceeds are helping children and their families, and their pasta sauces and salad dressings are some of the best. During my child's cancer experience, we were invited to a Newman's Own sponsored summer camp, Camp Boggy Creek, subtitled A Camp for the Seriously Ill. At the time, we had no idea it was affiliated with Mr. Newman and his altruistic endeavors. It was a family weekend, so we arrived late on a Friday night and bunked down shortly thereafter. In the morning, we went to the morning revelry mess call. Expecting camp food, we were stunned by the abundance of high-quality food and beverage products. And it didn't stop there. The staff and the facilities were remarkable. The rampant positivity, the experiences they created for these broken kids and families were amazing. That was a decade ago, and it feels like yesterday. What a beautiful man and vision. I am forever in debt to him and the people seeing this through. It's terrible to see so many sick kids in one place, and the next second it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. They're smiling, laughing, hugging. Spend the extra money on Newman's Own if you can. It goes somewhere beyond words. NyQuil knocks me out really good. The generic ones give me a weird half-awake feeling and I hate it. Whoa, I had a really weird trip on NyQuil as a kid, and it sounds similar to this. Maybe it was a generic. I swear, NyQuil gets me to bed in 10 minutes after I'm in bed. The generic one wakes me up multiple times, leaving me feeling half asleep. Dr. Pepper. Have you never had his younger, dumber brother, Mr. Pibb? Hey, Mr. Pibb earns his money. He doesn't need a fancy degree. He's a soda I'd have a drink with. Cheez-Its. The knockoffs always taste like garbage. We are a Cheez-Its family, not a Cheese Nips family. Plastic wrap. It's worth it to buy the name brand because the box doesn't fall apart. Have you heard about our Lord and Savior Kirkland? I've been using my same roll for years. Kirkland actually co-brands their plastic wrap. It's actually a stretch-type brand, which is considered one of the best out there. 409 Cleaner. Nothing else works the same. But I've been noticing that Clorox is downplaying 409 in favor of Clorox brand. The amount of shelf space of 409 is shrinking. They also keep changing the label or adding all these different product lines. 409 Plus, 409 Bathroom. No, I just want the regular 409 Cleaner. Console controllers. Anything that isn't official, other than the super high-end competition level crap, is actual crap. Looking at you, Logitech. My only counter-argument to this is that I bought some knockoff GameCube controllers for about $8 each from Amazon, and they're about 70% as good. There's a noticeable drop in quality, but for an $8 controller, it certainly exceeded expectations for a, "Here, little cousin, you can have this one" controller. Dawn fish soap and Gain laundry detergent. Dawn is the only thing that keeps my fish clean. There's always Pine Sol. Sears Tower. I made the mistake of saying Willis Tower to a Chicagoan once. When I was a kid, they decided to change the name of the Sears Tower, and it's like the "is Pluto a planet" argument of Illinoisans my age. Windex. No, the store brand leaves a film. Try Sprayway. I've switched from Windex. I clean windows for a living, and Sprayway is miles better than Windex. We can always tell when a customer uses Windex, but then had to call us because they couldn't get rid of streaks. Coca-Cola. It's a small thing, but the generic colas just don't taste the same. Paper towels. The cheap ones just don't tear right. I used to think this as well, but I found that the Costco paper towels tear better than Bounty. Try them out sometime. Costco's Kirkland signature brand is like cheating for this question. It's generally at least as good as the popular brand. Reynolds Wrap aluminum foil. Heavy duty. It pains me that I discovered heavy duty late in life. Heavy duty should be a life pro tip. Heinz ketchup. The others are too watery. One of the big disappointments in life is opening someone's fridge and finding Hunt's, or God forbid, Red Gold. WD-40. Surprised I haven't seen it here yet. What is a generic of WD-40? As far as I know, it's a pretty unique product. Claussen pickles. I was any kind of pickle guy till a few years ago, Claussen only now. The pickles in the refrigerated section are in a different league compared to the ones that don't need to be refrigerated. Ice cream, frozen dairy dessert is not ice cream, and screw them for sneaking out 0.5 quarts of it so I only get 1.5 quarts of ice cream for the same price. I see your tricks, happening with chips and other food too. Tillamook for the win. If I'm not getting Ben & Jerry's, it's either Bluebell or Tillamook. French's classic yellow mustard and Heinz ketchup. Kraft mac and cheese. I've yet to find an off-brand that tastes right. Annie's. I would argue Annie's is marketed higher quality option versus a generic option. That's not a Safeway brand or anything. Daisy sour cream. Absolutely no substitute will ever be allowed in my house. Sour cream should not contain gelatin. Boar's Head for deli meat and cheese. Not that anything else is bad per se, but nothing else compares. I work in a Publix deli. After having tried most of the Boar's Head products, I really try to push people to buy them over Publix meats and cheeses. There are a few things that you can't really tell the difference between brands, but I love the variety and big flavors of Boar's Head. Honestly, giving out free samples is the best part of my job. Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. The generic just didn't taste the same to me. Cheerios. The generic just are not even close to the same. OtterBox. Those phone cases mean business. I was rather impressed that my mother-in-law killed an OtterBox. I didn't think it could be done. Swingline stapler. If they took my Swingline, it'd be the last straw. Burn it to the ground. Q-tips. The stems break and bend in the off-brands. Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Other brands vary widely. It's the 2 scoops. It's the sugar embedded on the 2 scoops, let's be real here. Purell hand sanitizer. What, you mean you don't like smelling of bottom shelf liquor after you've sanitized your hands? Yeah, nothing like smelling of off-brand tequila after sanitizing your hands. Campbell's tomato soup. Philadelphia cream cheese. Tried tons of generic brands over the years when money was tight, but they're all funky to me. Now it's the only thing I let myself always splurge on. Kikkoman soy sauce, Lysol, Advil. I'll always go for generic Advil. Mostly every OTC drug is identical when comparing name brand to generic, and I'll save the huge markup. Yup, and even then you gotta look at the prices. The other day I was at the pharmacy, store brand ibuprofen in the 1,000 count bottle was like $36. Right next to it they had 2 500 count bottles for $26. A&W root beer. I will die on this hill. Barks is the way, man, but hey, anything is better than mug. Kraft singles. If I'm going to eat plasticized cheese-adjacent product, it had better be name brand plasticized cheese-adjacent product. Bailey's. It really disappoints me when a restaurant tries to substitute a different brand. You can usually tell just by the color and smell before you even taste it. Most people seem to be throwing out things like food, drink, soaps, etc. consumables, but I'll throw an odd one out there with tools. Always worth spending more for a name brand set of drivers or Allen keys if you happen to need more. Cheaper own brand things in the supermarket just won't last as long, and you'll end up spending more with how often you have to replace them anyway. Hidden Valley Ranch. It's just better. I won't buy any other brand, even though they cost a lot less. All shelf-stable ranch is pure crap. If you're talking about the dust packets you make yourself, I can agree. Saltines. Now this is true. I have a hard time paying $4 for saltine crackers, but the cheaper ones taste stale right out of the box, and I'm one of those weirdos that'll sit and eat crackers and butter all day. Duke's mayonnaise. There are none better. I've heard of Duke's but never had it. We're strictly best foods. Hellmann's. Frank's Red Hot. Nothing else even comes close. Hidden Valley Ranch. They literally invented the stuff. Heinz ketchup. Pretty much all the other ketchup is a jam like you'd put in a PB&J. I was watching Taskmaster last night, an English show, and a comment was made, "It looks like the cheap vinegary ketchup, but it's the opposite in the US, lol. That vinegar ketchup is the premium." White Barn candles. Rather wait till I can afford the really good candles rather than buy the cheap Walmart brand that barely has any scent. Are these what BBW sells? Feminine products. Before I got my IUD, it was always infinity or nothing. Absolute best protection I ever had. Also my toothpaste. Oral care isn't exactly fun, and it's made more difficult by one of my autoimmunes. While from a chemistry standpoint, toothpastes are basically the same. Not so much from a flavor standpoint. I want my crest complete in cinnamon. Gordon fish sticks. Every other fish stick basically melts in the oven. We don't eat them a lot, so it's easy to get them when they go on sale. Legos. Anyone that says that other brands like Mega Bloks are the same are full of crap. Mr. Clean Magic Sponges. Yeah, you can get the 50 million off-brand melamine sponges for 2 cents, but then you have 50 million pieces of crap that fall apart if you look at them. Get the Mr. Clean ones. Cascade Platinum Dishwasher Detergent. I used to use store brands for years. I managed to have a good coupon one time for Cascade and bought it instead. The dishes came out so clean compared to what I used to use, I don't even think about using anything else now. Also paper towels and toilet paper. Northern or Cottonelle, usually for toilet paper. Nearly any brand name paper towel will outperform a generic. Jif Peanut Butter. I tried Sam's Club and Costco generics. Bad idea. Cereal in general. Generic cereal is always smaller, harder, less sugary, or is like eating milk-soaked cardboard. Work gear, particularly pants and work boots. Carhartt and Red Wings all the way. Over-the-counter medicine, Advil, NyQuil, and Vicks products have always been reliable for me, and I have no reason to switch to anything else. Synthroid. It's a thyroid replacement hormone, and generic doesn't work for everyone. But it's always a fight because insurance companies refuse to pay for brand name, and they insist on you taking the generic even though doctors and pharmacists will tell you that the generic version sucks and doesn't work for many people. I don't like feeling tired and having my hair fall out, so I will stick with the brand name. Lay's potato chips, especially the salt and vinegar. No one's salt and vinegar tastes as good as Lay's. Tampax. Downstairs is not the place to go cheap. Pop-Tarts. No generic toaster pastry comes close. Rouse pasta sauce. It's the only sauce I buy anymore. The price is high, so I always make sure to save as much leftover as possible. Chef Boyardee spaghetti and meatballs. Yeah, I know, but I love them. Head and Shoulders. The store brand doesn't work as well for my hair. Any type of cereal. Frosted mini spooners go hard though. I saw a meme years ago pointing out that all the Maltameal cereal names sound like euphemisms for homosexual men, and I can't unsee it when I'm in the breakfast aisle now. Nutella. Please try Milka. It's without palm oil and even better. I'll die on this mountain. Golden spicy brown mustard. Febreze. I've tried everything else. Nothing can remove stench or smell better than the products they sell. Royal Purple Engine Oil. I'll never use different oil for a medium to high performance motor vehicle. I'll die on this hill. If you own a vehicle that hauls, tows, or you are just heavy on the pedals because it's fun to drive, look into Royal Purple. Bluebell Ice Cream. Nothing compares, even though it has some artificial ingredients, it's simply the best. I used to probably place it the highest, but Tillamook blows it out of the water for me. Even just Tillamook's plain old-fashioned vanilla. I literally can just eat it by itself, which I never really wanted to do with Bluebell's plain vanilla. Cream of chicken soup. I use it for pot roast. Generic always tastes like the can. I make pork chops, slow cooked in cream of mushroom a lot. Insane how expensive Campbell's cream of mushroom soup is, but you are absolutely right. Generic will ruin a good dinner. Microsoft Office. Interesting take. For business, definitely. At home, Google Docs is good enough for writing whatever is needed. As someone with learning disabilities, Microsoft Office has better spelling and grammar checks. Levi's. Not anymore. They've cheapened themselves out of selling to me. Mostly these days, for jeans, I get the All-American Clothing Company, made in USA by union workers. High quality for basically the same price. I would buy All-American jeans if they had a rigid option. I'm currently rocking some peonies I got from the clearance section at Target. I had a pair of made in USA Levi's about 5 years ago, white oak Cone Mills denim. They were rigid, shrink to fit. Levi's quit making them in 2017 after Cone Mills shut down their last USA production facility. If you didn't wash them, they were rough. You could light a match off of them like in the old Warner cartoons. And I did. The old white oak looms are now in Vidalia, Louisiana, producing that old-fashioned selvage denim that I grew up with. Several boutique jean makers use Vidalia denim. They'll cost you nearly $200 a pair because they're made to order. What's a trade secret you know from working the industry? If you ship through FedEx Express, if you're sending many packages or envelopes to a single stop, ship one priority overnight and the rest standard. They'll be delivered together with the priority package. Express Courier here, this is on point. I hate having to double back to a stop, so if I see a business priority and 3 more standard, I get giddy because I can do that stop as one instead of 2 separate ones. A resistor is made in Japan. It is wrapped in plastic and shipped to Michigan. It's installed into a small PCB. It is wrapped in plastic and shipped to Taiwan. That PCB is installed via a sideboard connector onto a larger PCB. It is shipped to China. That PCB is installed in a small housing via a harness. It is shipped to India. That housing has its microchips programmed, and the outside is given a chemical treatment. It is shipped back to Michigan. The housing is now treated and installed into a car side mirror. It is shipped to Ohio. The side mirror is run through a post-production sort program to check for defects. It is shipped to Detroit. It is installed onto a car. Every single step of that shipping, every single component is wrapped in plastics, a million of them per car, to over half a dozen locations each. Something like 50 million cars is produced each year. Your straws aren't doing crap for the use of plastics. Automotive production and diagnostics engineer. We learned about this in high school, and that teacher was criticized for his curriculum. He was literally the only adult to take time and risk for information he knew was critical for us. From simple tax advice to starting small business to securing small loans to not getting ripped off on car insurance. All this stuff, and none of it was part of his daily lesson. We had one of those at my high school, and he got forced into early retirement. Students were incredibly upset. He would have had special lesson days going over how credit card companies would soon be trying to F us over the minute we turned 18, or set foot in college, and how bad the interest rates would be. Other basic life skills like figuring out where we could get roadside from if we didn't learn to change tires, differences in insurances on cars, some Diet Ramsey stuff like having an emergency fund in a separate account. We need more teachers like him, not less. We actually did find and file that bug in your favorite video game. Our leadership just decided it was okay to ship with it. In addition to that, we actually did a test and balanced the game to a specific difficulty. When you play it and say, did the devs even test this game? The answer is yes, we did. And that is the behavior or difficulty we expected to be best. Sometimes we get it wrong, but most of the time we get it right. Most of the time we got it right, you don't take notice because you're having fun. But also sometimes the person who does the balancing of a specific feature or mechanic is at that point far too good at the game to realize they may have made something too difficult. The last bit reminds me of I Wanna Be the Boshi. At one point of the game, you had to jump over this spider crab monster. The story goes when the developer was making this part, they tested the jump out to see if it was good. They made the jump and moved on with no further adjustments. That jump is frame perfect, and they just so happened to nail it on the first try without thinking about it. If you want to book a rental car, but they're sold out, book it for a week or 2 longer than you actually need it, and then just return the car early and you'll only get charged for the time that you had it. All the systems owned by Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Enterprise, Alamo, and National automatically open up their system to long-term reservations and will make sure you get a car over someone who booked it for only a day or 2. Worked there for 2 years. It's a dirty business, but at least I learned a lot of rental hacks, LMAO. So you mean if I try to rent a car for a day and it says there's none, if I put in a request for 2 weeks, it will now say there's a car? Most electronic medical records allow providers to put pop-up warnings in your chart if you act verbally or physically aggressive. If you yelled at the ER nurse in 2017, the medical assistant you called today begging for a last-minute appointment can see it. This is a Seinfeld episode. Well, now you're just being difficult. If you are buying software for your workplace, get a quote and then go silent until it's the end of that quarter. Then call the sales rep and tell them you can buy it today, but only have enough budget for 70% of the cost. Your chances for a discount go way up at the end of the quarter. As an enterprise software sales rep, screw you. Also, I totally agree. We narrowed down our finance software to 2 and told NetSuite to make us their best offer, not telling them what Sage offered. They pretty much said, here's what it would be, but I got the great deal and argued for you to get it 50% off. It was far cheaper than Sage, but still crazy and almost offensive that they'd have these kinds of markups. On any piece of machinery, if the welds you see look like crap, the welds you don't see are even worse. As a layman, what can I look for to evaluate the quality of welds? The toes, or edges of the weld. They need to blend into the material. If there's a crevice along the toe, it's called an undercut and is a pore fusion. Most machinery welds are flux MIG and should look and feel smooth. If there are pinholes or cracks in the weld, it should have never passed the QC. Those are the most notable traits, but also an ugly weld doesn't mean it's a bad weld. There's lots of stuff to look for. But for the most part, if they don't have anything I listed, it's a weld I would trust. Calls are not being answered in the order received. And let me guess, it's not unusually high call volume, it's that they just haven't hired enough people to actually answer all the calls in a reasonable time frame. Also, the menus haven't recently changed. If you are wondering what's taking me so long to process your loan application, it's because I forgot about it. Is this why title companies insist that you need to come down and sign today? I've been waiting on you for weeks, but if I don't sign today, the whole thing will come crashing down. Yes, or at least maybe, either they've run up against some arbitrary timeline that they need to hit for the application to remain valid, or they need to close the loan to meet monthly sales targets. Casinos don't need to cheat. We have already rigged the game against you. Funniest thing I've ever heard from a bookie is that all his clients will tell you at the end of the year that they're about even. Oh yeah? Then how did I afford this BMW? He'd say. You gotta love the gamblers who always win. One of my friends would talk about her friend who always wins. I'm like, you mean the dude living with his parents in his 30s who has put himself on the do not let me in the casino list twice? That guy? Yeah, gamblers only tell you when they win. The urine pregnancy tests that you take at the doctor's is the same as the Dollar Tree one. You can buy them on Amazon in bulk packs of like 50 for $7. May have gone up since I bought mine, but I haven't had to buy another since. When you order at a drive-thru, the microphone stays on until you move forward, so everyone inside the store with a headset on can hear your conversation until you leave the ordering area. I always leave my music low till I pull away for this exact suspicion. Now that it's confirmed, I'll also watch my mouth. Another pro tip, turn off your windshield wipers at the drive-thru. It pelts the worker with your rainwater. The tourism industry here. Look up when the peak season for the destination you're looking at is. There are usually cheaper prices at the beginning and the end of the season. Try to book at the beginning of the season. Seasonal workers work themselves ragged and are usually completely burnt out at the end. At the beginning of the season, everyone is stoked to start making money again. Is there anything wrong with just booking off-season? If it's a destination based on climate or natural phenomena, it might not exist in the off-season, i.e. a ski resort won't have snow in the summer. People might not want to go to the beach in the winter, etc. Having a crew that can pass a drug test is not the same as having a drug-free crew. When one guy can pass a drug test, everyone can pass a drug test. In my last job, I got randomly drug tested 3 times in that many weeks, as the company I worked for was more than 98% certain I was the only worker out of the 9 guys running the whole processing plant that could pass the test. Worked in high-end golf clubs for years, almost all politicians register their handicap scores under a false name. The USGA handicap records are technically public information, and people would be pretty mad if they knew how much time these guys actually spend playing golf. You could accidentally and anonymously publish the names and associations. I work at one of these places. Good luck getting any proof of connection since it's not required. They just need to be a member of members' guests, and players submit. You would have to be the one to help them to know or overhear them. Movie industry. Unless you are absolutely breathtaking in your audition, which does happen, don't get me wrong, there is a list of 30 people each studio prioritizes to be in their major films. I worked at a small talent agency. We had 4 to 5 people that fit every description, and we sent them all to all the same auditions, just like every other agency for the same role. Talent and looks only go so far. Then you have to get lucky. You've got to be good-looking, talented, and well-connected. Makes total sense when you see the children of Hollywood stars moving up the ranks. Their parents made the connections, and then made the introductions. Most fossils in museums are replicas. These days, they're usually plastic casts from silicone molds of real fossils, but 3D printed replicas made from high-resolution scans are becoming more and more a part of things. And that's because they're hard to display and are also valuable, correct? Yep. Also, they're just rare, and animals are almost never 100% complete or even close to complete. Gotta fill in the gaps somehow. If a medical professional ever suggests you get a second opinion, e.g. a nurse at the doctor's office, it can be a code for they are concerned about the quality of the medical care you are currently receiving, and that you really should get a second opinion. A nurse saved me by doing this. When the doctor blew off a positive result as a false positive and then did it again 6 months later, I'd probably be dead if it wasn't for her. And if the doctor has handled the first result properly, my quality of life would be much better. Thank you, nurse. All I can say is wash the tops of your canned goods before opening them, folks. For the love of God, do it. Started doing this with drink cans after getting a particularly grimy six-pack of drinks once. Never thought about my tomatoes though, and even worked at a food supply warehouse back in the day, so I should have known. Good tip. In rear storage rooms of grocery stores, pallets of soda are stored and block access to the storage racks. In order to get to the blocked items, we would walk across the cans of soda. Not sure if any of this is a secret, but if you can't find a book at your local library, ask the reference librarian to do an interlibrary loan. They have access to large networks of libraries that are able and willing to share materials, sometimes even across state lines depending on the sort of library and request. Also, utilize the digital content. We have to pay big bucks and fight with publishing companies to get that content, ebooks, audiobooks, etc., and they are great resources. Libby and Overdrive are awesome. Many library systems also offer streaming content of movies and TV shows. Oh, and you can check out national park passes and museum tickets too at many libraries. Some rent out power tools, projector screens, 3D printing services, provide seed libraries, and the one near me does board game packs that come with board games and a movie. Yup, they also participate in free meals for kids programs, offer free meeting spaces for community events, and lend out hotspots for broadband internet access. Libraries are cool. Arcade crane games have knobs inside that let you control how strong the claw grabs. So you basically make the claw really weak strength, and then there's a setting in the motherboard to make the claw go full power after a certain amount of plays. Whatever the arcade or owner decides how often they want people to actually win. I grew up in a pretty small town, and my favorite little mom and pop restaurant had a claw machine that would pay out pretty much every time. None of that sloppy floppy claw nonsense. When I was a little kid, I thought I must be really good at the game. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that the settings are adjustable. The sweet old man that ran the restaurant just liked to see us kids happy. What a great fella. Being happy by simply seeing kids being happy. Wholesome. The US military wastes an extraordinary amount of money, and not necessarily on weapons or personnel or anything like that. Every year, commanders must submit their total spending for the previous year. If they did not spend the granted amount, they lose it next year. So for example, if a commander is granted $5 million for his building, but he only spends $4 million, his next budget will drop to $4 million. This results in commanders ordering expensive stuff in bulk, replacing good furniture and equipment, and enacting pointless construction projects such as a parking lot when they don't need it. Great example, when he couldn't make the budget, our commander ordered 360-inch TVs and had them placed in the hallways, spare rooms, and tossed the remainder in storage. Each TV was overpriced at around $1,000. Commander met his budget though, so I guess it was a success. Welcome to the bloated US military. A lot of the federal government works this way. A lot of corporations do too. A certain 48-inch interstate natural gas pipeline valve is being kept open by a strategically placed piece of 2x4 lumber. If the valve was closed, millions of people would be without nat gas fairly quickly. Things like this make me wonder how fragile the world really is. A few years ago, the Canadian telecom company Bell was doing scheduled maintenance and cutting a line. No problem, redundant networks, blah blah. Someone somewhere accidentally cut a redundant line at the same time. Shut down the network for like 18 hours. This was about 5 to 10 years ago. More recently, Rogers, another oligopoly member in Canada, had an internet outage which stopped debit machines from working nationwide. Duct tape and twigs, my friend. When moving into a new rental, before you move anything in, take a video of your walkthrough and mention and point out everything and anything. Mark the date, time, and address. If they give you a small form to write on, make your own. This can save you lots of issues when you move out. Also, take a video when you leave. I took a bunch of pictures when leaving a rental house, almost as an afterthought because I didn't trust the landlord, who was my sister's husband, and they both behaved like complete craps while I lived there. The next day I got a call from my dad chastising me for thrashing the house because my sister told him I did. She said there were broken things, filth everywhere, damage to the structure, etc. I sent him the pictures I took before I left, and he apologized and gave her a mild telling off for lying about it. She mumbled something about, "Well, I found an old pizza crust under the couch," which I knew was crap because I cleaned under there, even though there was zero ground clearance, but unfortunately I didn't take a picture of it under the couch. The net result is that I barely speak to her or her husband, and it damaged my relationship with my dad because it was a tipping point of her word being golden and me having to back up everything I say with concrete supporting evidence. At any given point in time, roughly 10 to 20% of the entire internet has a dev team in an absolute panic state. The websites you use for every aspect of your life are held together with duct tape and shoestrings. Truth. Being on the inside has ruined the magic of the internet for me. Every website I visit now, I just see the potential defects and failures I know are there. Yet, amazingly, the internet handled the digital surge during the pandemic. It's resilient and proved its massive scalability. When you play match 3 games like Candy Crush Saga, after beating a few levels, the game will make it impossible for you to continue. You will be getting impossible odds. If you put your device aside and return after several hours or a day later, you will find the previously impossible level to be easy AF. It is a mechanism to prevent people from burning through hundreds of levels in one go. Does this apply for Duolingo too? Unfortunately, no. Duolingo uses linear and characterized patterns of difficulty spikes. Sadly, the only real answer is to get good. At Starbucks, they have a recycling and trash bin. They both go into the dumpster. There's a Chipotle with those and a compost bin. They don't compost. And there's one dumpster out back. But I guess it makes people feel good? Recycling in general is just about feeling good. Most of it doesn't get recycled. Awards tend to be bullcrap. Award companies are there to sell advertising. They make up awards, offer winning titles to businesses, and then charge them to include their name in their literature. For example, the business my husband and I own recently won a national award. We were even asked what award we'd like to win. What's the title of the award you feel you're best suited to? We could have made anything up, and we'd have given it Best XYZ in the known universe. To receive the certificate, we need to pay them PS70. For a trophy, it's PS225. To have a quarter-page spread in their magazine, it's PS650. For a featured article, we'd have to pay them PS2000. It's a load of bullcrap. Nobody ever remembers who gave the award, and frankly, we aren't daft enough to pay for a featured article nobody will ever read. So we just use the term award-winning in our own advertising now. Can confirm this one. I worked at a company that ran an awards dinner every year at industry conventions, and it was ridiculously lucrative, like well into the 7 figures for a 250-seat event. All emergency rooms are not equal emergency rooms. In my hospital, we don't have any sort of OB, pediatrics, or any of that. Whenever a kid comes in, or worse, a baby, the nurses and doctors are all in a panic. Not because they're incompetent, but because that's not what our hospital does regularly. Sure, we will stabilize to the best of our ability, and we will immediately call the local children's hospital, but if you have a child, for example, in distress, and you have multiple hospitals nearby, try being aware beforehand which one is best for yours or your child's needs. You don't want to rush into an ER where there isn't someone who can confidently and effectively treat you. 100%, take your children to a children's hospital if it's at all feasible or safe to get there. It's night and day. Children's hospitals are amazing at what they do, in both providing pediatric care and dealing with families. I can't thank them enough for the care they've provided my children over the years. The times we've taken our kids into a regular ER, once a misdiagnosis that caused a lot more misery and pain, the other, the doctor got straight kicked in the face by an angry toddler during stitches. For every publicly announced data breach, whether that be a confirmed leak or the identification of a security flaw, there are 50 other such incidents that companies swept under the rug. Data security is complicated, and most organizations don't have the proper expertise to secure their data. I would go farther and say there are probably lots of companies that never even knew they were compromised. In real estate, open houses are primarily to get more leads and clients for the agents hosting the open house, not to get your house sold. One of my parents was a realtor, and they tried so hard to convince clients not to do open houses. They only attract nosy neighbors, and no one in the area bought houses that way. They all did showings instead, but clients insisted in order to get their money's worth, I guess. As a nosy neighbor interested in home design and the real estate market, I love open houses. Most sweet and sour sauce from Chinese restaurants is literally just ketchup, white vinegar, and honey. We make ours from pineapple juice, cornstarch, vinegar, and sugar. If this is not how mine does it, it's very close. Definitely no ketchup in it. If your IT guy sounds annoyed, there's a good chance it's because he's spent way too much time fighting with management, telling them not to do the thing that caused your problem. I can fill a thread with this stuff. Please tell me you clicked on website or mail this or that before your PC went to crap. It used to be just your PC, but these days, it means I can rescue the entire network before it goes to crap, if I know what I'm dealing with fast enough. MFA, a good backup, proper security settings, maintenance, updates, antivirus, disk encryption are all not to make you pay more, it's the bare minimum you should be doing. Microsoft 365 has quickly become just as complex as servers were before. Don't buy the commercial that you can do it yourself. The welds on something can tell you a lot about the quality assurance happening during production. Not just the welds, unfortunately. I once relieved a guy torquing bolts on a car line who neither knew how to use the torque wrench nor what he was supposed to be tightening the bolts to. It was my one day on the job as a temp. As a freelance photographer, most magazines and newspapers don't pay you for using your photos. They offer you photo credit only. If you ask to be paid, they just get a similar photo from someone else. Also, if you have a unique photo or video, always go non-exclusive and sell it to everyone. You get way more that way than just selling it to one as an exclusive. In recording studios, very rarely is a vocal sung all the way through. What you're hearing is each line punched individually, almost always. In some popular music, it goes even further than that. Lots of vocal tracks are comped together, with even individual syllables being stitched together from different takes. From there, they pitch correct, even out the clip volumes, layer multiple vocals, compress them, and then automate them to get the absolutely most perfect pitch, tone, and level across the song. A final vocal in a modern major production resembles an actual performance as much as a hot dog resembles a pig. That being said, hot dogs can be damn tasty. Things may have changed in the past few years, but generally speaking, plastic is hardly ever recycled anymore. It used to be shipped to China for processing, but even they had a hard time with the amount of pollution and toxic waste produced by recycling it. Now it will get shipped to other countries in Asia, where more often than not, it just gets dumped into the Pacific Ocean. A lot of municipalities just add it to a landfill. On the other end of the spectrum, aluminum recycling is amazing. That's because it takes more energy and effort to make new aluminum than to recycle it. The process of refining aluminum is such an intensive process that it accounts for about 1% of total global CO2 emissions. Then recycling it is so easy it hardly amounts to any CO2. It's interesting to see the cost/benefit of using aluminum, one of the more interesting metals out there. Attorneys can really only remember the details of about 20 to 40 cases at a time. So if you call your attorney after about a month or two, depending on the firm and how busy they are, they likely completely forgot what happened to you and are working off a set of notes to pretend they have any clue who you are. Especially if you've really only interacted with them via phone other than one time in person for an intake or whatever. Please don't be offended if your lawyer needs 3 to 4 data points to remember what case you are. Some of us carry over 100 at a time and my brain just needs a minute. But once I boot up that you're the one with the 3 random things that make you stand out, I really do remember the whole thing. I will never ever remember the case by your name. I'd be a much more expensive lawyer if I had sales skills like that. Who is universally loved, but is actually an a-hole? Oprah. She spent decades getting paid by every quack with a pseudoscientific health product to appear as a guest on her show. It's no wonder her apprentices are a dubious psychiatrist and the quack weirdo doctor who continued her business of using the trust of gullible Americans to sell snake oil. I have always disliked Oprah. I remember once on her show, they were talking about how dirty certain things around the house are. It was mentioned how much bacteria builds up on bed sheets, and the guest recommends washing sheets at least once a week, and that rich Oprah scoffs, looks disgusted, and said, "I have mine changed every day." To which the guest says, "Well, for the average person, that's not practical." She quickly forgot what it's like to not be ultra rich. My mom was a big Oprah fan when I was a kid, so I grew up watching the show with her. I used to like her, mainly because of those big giveaways and fun stuff she would do like that. But then there was one show she did where she was showing. I don't even remember what exactly the show's theme was, just that part of it was demonstrating products. So it was probably one of her, "These are my favorite new things and you should all definitely buy them too" episodes. One of the products she was showing off was bras, specifically sports bras. So she had all these models come out in different styles and colors of this sports bra, and she would walk around them and talk about all of the cool features. Then she was showing off the support of one of the bras by literally jiggling one of the model's boobs. She would grab right below the boob and shake, so she wasn't groping, but was definitely shaking a girl's breast on national television. The model was clearly uncomfortable and actually pushed Oprah's hand off, and Oprah kept talking without acknowledging it, then did it again, and the model had to push her off again. It made me so uncomfortable to watch this, and I've never been able to like Oprah ever since. So gross. I felt so sorry for that poor model who definitely had no power or recourse in the situation. Before it became public knowledge, I always had to tell people what an asshole Bill Cosby was 20 plus years ago. Old guy here who can remember when Lisa Bonet said like 30 years ago that she didn't think highly of Bill Cosby, and the whole world came down on her like, how can this entitled little brat who owes her whole career to Bill Cosby not love him? Turns out she was just a better judge of character than most. Until recently, Ellen. I cannot speak for the rest of society, but I certainly never liked her. She has dead eyes. I can't explain it, but she does. Ellen's fall from grace has been well-deserved and overdue. Well, she was always off. That's why most fellow comedians didn't associate with her as much, even when she got famous. I've never really been clear on how she actually got to be so famous. Jerry from Tom and Jerry. I completely agree with you. I always felt bad for Tom. Tom was just being a good cat trying to get rid of a pest. Jerry clearly had advanced intelligence and could have relocated literally anywhere else with ease, yet he chose to stay and gleefully tortured an innocent cat for years. I've got my suspicions about Steve Harvey. The audacity to be married like 4 times and then write a book about marriage. What do you know about marriage, Steve? What does Steve Harvey not know about marriage? We asked 100 of his ex-wives. The top 7 answers are on the board. Wilson. The way he just floated away at the end like their friendship meant nothing. Such a smug look on his face, too. What a total prick. I thought y'all were talking about Wilson from Home Improvement and was so confused about what his face looked like. Maya Angelou was a raging bish. The gal in the office next to mine had to coordinate her visit to our university. She said in her 30-year career of coordinating VIP celebrity speakers, Maya Angelou was the only one who treated her like absolute crap. She did a lecture at my college, and a student asked a question that I thought was completely reasonable. Something along the lines of, do you ever get discouraged during the writing process, and how do you keep going? She started berating him for asking such a stupid question, and was like, look at my body of work. Where do you get the idea that I'm ever discouraged? It was really weird. Hello. I respect you and would like to learn from you in this educational setting you agreed to attend. Screw you. Dr. Phil. He takes advantage of mentally ill people for money. I lost all respect for him after hearing Todd Herzog's story. For those who don't know, Todd won Survivor at 22 and suffered from alcoholism in the years following. He went on Dr. Phil in 2013 and they gave him alcohol and Xanax. His appearance on the show was, not great. Fortunately, he turned his life around and got married a couple of years ago. Damn, I lost all respect for Phil. I don't call him doctor. When he had the guy that was running the Bum Fights website on, Phil was hoping to lay some sort of righteous smackdown, but the dude showed up dressed exactly like Phil, bald spot and all. When confronted about how he exploits other people's suffering for monetary gain, dude just fired back, "Isn't that exactly what you do?" and was promptly booted off the show, interview over. Phil was butthurt because a degenerate called him on his crap on national TV. Steve Jobs. People worship him, and I understand why to some extent. He revolutionized technology, but he was very emotionally abusive to his daughter. She released a memoir, if I recall correctly. Very disturbing stuff. He was a grade A peen to his daughter's mother. He left both of them on welfare and food stamps. He was a grade A peen to everyone. Steve Jobs was huffing his own farts until the day he died. Rachel Ray. Loved her show until I went to see her live. In between takes, she was not a very nice person. I knew someone who did production work for Food Network in the early 2000s. Most of the personalities at the time were actually pretty lovely, but apparently Rachel Ray was borderline despised by the film and production crews. She was just generally known as a mean person to work with. I had one of her cookbooks because I found it at a thrift store. It was just unnecessarily confusing. Instead of steps, there are paragraphs. She has no idea how long prep work actually takes. In the 15 seconds, the garlic is sautéing before adding the oysters, zest 3 lemons, that kind of stuff. SpongeBob. Imagine living near him. Squidward is worse. I have one in my building. That asshole was squeaking and squawking on his clarinet at 10:30, regularly. Absolutely awful shrieking, old creaky door noises. I had to take a few recordings of this happening late at night and send it to the administration. Thing is, SpongeBob and Squidward actually lived in separate houses a fair distance from each other. It wasn't like Squidward was SpongeBob's upstairs neighbor. Also, Squidward's house is literally made of thick-ass rock sediment. I think it's safe to assume that it's quite a bit soundproof. SpongeBob's voice and other shenanigans cut through all of that and still bothered Squidward. But that's exactly the point. SpongeBob is loud. We never see a single scene where Squidward's clarinet playing is heard while SpongeBob is in his house. But we see countless scenes where Squidward is trying to sleep, but SpongeBob prevents it with his noise. Old reference, but Gary Berghoff, aka Radar from MASH. Apparently he was notoriously hard to work with, and generally an asshole to the movie and show cast and crew. But his character was so beloved that viewers never thought he was like that. On the flip side, poor Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns, was known to be an extremely nice guy, but got sneered at and generally treated like crap by the public due to his character in the show. Just goes to show you should separate the art from the artist. I grew up near Gary. He lived in my hometown for a long time and had some kids when he was quite old already. I went to school with his son in the early 2000s. Have met him and seen him around a lot. Can confirm he's a total peen, and you cannot call him Radar. He'll flip his absolute crap on you. I have a friend who lived next door to him in Paradise. When he was still up there, he sounded like an absolute nightmare neighbor. Pretty much all your favorite rock stars from the 70s and 80s had underage girlfriends. Some even adopted them from as young as 14 and became their legal guardians so they could live with and have sex with them and essentially keep them trapped at home to not get caught. Steven Tyler and Jimmy Page stick out, but Bowie and Prince get dishonorable mentions. I'm sure that's just a start. Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old when he was 38, 16. So did Paul Walker in his 30s. Steve Harvey. For those who want to know, watch his interviews on women and atheists. He's cheated on his wives, is physically abusive, and acts like religion is the only thing between him and killing and raping people. Back in the 2010s, I was all over that odd future Wolfgang kill them all slogan, free Earl and screw Steve Harvey. Earl's been freed, but screw Steve Harvey. Probably 90% of celebrities. Not Keanu, he's the whole 10%. Martha Stewart. I witnessed her call her assistant, and I quote, a worthless piece of crap. No one should be called that for accidentally dropping her handbag. Was waiting for this. I work in the aviation industry and have for 25 years now. Back when I was still fairly new, I was working line service for an FBO, a fixed base operator, the folks who provide handling services for private and corporate aircraft. One day, a plane comes in after dropping a passenger off in Maine. The crew needed someone to clean the airplane, and the job fell to me. The plane was trashed, food ground into the carpeting, garbage all over the place, pet hair everywhere. Took me a few hours to scrub the inside of that plane. The crew thanked me and gave me a $100 tip afterwards. Then the captain said to me, "You'll never guess who made that mess." Martha Stewart. I was in shock. He said she was the biggest bitch they had ever flown, and both the captain and the first officer said they would refuse to fly her in the future. I am now an airline pilot, but I have several friends who went into the corporate private fractional side of aviation. Martha Stewart has been kicked out of every fractional jet ownership program there is. Raytheon, Travel Air, Flight Options, NetJets, FlexJet, and several others, all because of her abusive and downright nasty treatment of staff. Heard the same thing from a friend who is in the fractional side. Worst celebrity ever. Tim Allen lived near me for a while. Always a pompous ass. However, the gentleman who plays Gus Fring on Breaking Bad is a real good guy. Remembered my name and says hi to me when we run into each other at Whole Foods. He also tipped the cashier at Whole Foods $100 just because. Ironic. He remembered your name, but to you, he is the gentleman who played Gus Fring. Not sure if they're universally loved, but I used to work in restaurants for the House of Mouse, and both Howie Mandel and Bobby McFerrin were total jerks. Acted like they were completely above everyone else, and both of them let their bratty kids run screaming around the restaurant. Always smart when people carrying hot trays of food are everywhere. I had a lot of positive celebrity interactions, but those two were awful. Can't stand to listen to Don't Worry Be Happy since. I can confirm Mandel was a total asshole. I work at a restaurant in Toronto and threw some party for some game show, and he was just such a peen to everyone, to the point no one wanted to help him. He made some snide comment about who he is, and I said, "Oh, that's nice, but these other folks were still here before you." Heard of a similar comeback to this in the late 90s Ibiza scheme. The current DJ flavor of the month was in a bar expecting free champagne and pulled the "do you know who I am" routine. The bar lady apparently replied, "Yes, and you earn more than the rest of this bar put together. Pay up." Eric Clapton. What a douchebag he turned out to be. He's an oddity. His racist, coked-out rant in the 70s on stage sparked the Rock Against Racism movement. It's bizarre considering he idolizes and owes much of his success to American black blues artists. Seriously, B.B. King is his hero and he still hates black people? That's a hell of an internal contradiction. Love his music, but yeah, he's a bad egg. James Franco. The dude gets caught trying to sleep with underage girls regularly like he isn't even good at hiding it, yet he gets a pass every time. He recently settled a lawsuit for over $2 million for sexually harassing and groping the female students of a film course he was running, and his career has taken a nosedive over the last few years, with even longtime collaborator Seth Rogen saying he would never work with him again. So I wouldn't say he is loved or even liked at this point. Didn't know Seth Rogen was refusing to work with him. Good for him. He, Seth Rogen, seems like a genuinely good person and one of the good ones. Jennifer Lopez. I'll back that one up with stories from former coworkers. She was well known to the techs that did the telecom stuff in her Miami condo building. She was one of those no eye contact, no talking directly to people. I said the thread count has to be at least 600. You useless drudge. I can't stay here. She didn't make a lot of friends in the UK. Steve Jobs. It's pretty well known that he is a gigantic asshole, but he's still pretty romanticized in the tech sphere. I got to have a chat with Steve Wozniak, and while there was still an air of respect, Wozniak said Jobs had a great way with words, marketing, and tying the bows on a product. It was definitely underlined with a disdain for certain personality traits. He also made a lot of this clear during his presentation too. Side note, Wozniak was a delight to talk to. The dude just oozed enthusiasm and such positive energy overall. The fact that he even spent like 15 minutes talking to me after the convention was awesome in itself. There were hundreds of people there, and I bet most of them could have given him a more topical or engaging conversation. In fact, I mostly just wanted a photo with him. He was the one that engaged in a longer conversation. From what my fiance told me is that Beyonce is extremely entitled and rude to people. He worked in a restaurant where many celebrities would go and he loved most of them, Beyonce and Jay-Z. Remember when she had an entire hospital wing closed so she could give birth? It wasn't an entire wing of a hospital, but it was an entire section of the maternity ward. In some ways, that's worse. How many pregnant women were turned away? Additionally, her hired goons, bodyguards, would stop people from entering the entire maternity ward and tell them they couldn't come in, even if they had every right to be there. Gordon Ramsay is universally loved for being an a-hole. I'm pretty sure the twist here is he's actually a chill person, that's just his TV persona, but I could be wrong. You can watch the UK version of Kitchen Nightmares. All the yelling and swearing is for US TV. In the UK version, he is usually not mad, just very disappointed. From the crap that I've heard, apparently Nicolas Cage and Jared Leto. Meanwhile, apparently Alan Tudyk, Brendan Fraser, and Nathan Fillion are the nicest people. Jared Leto is no surprise. What a pompous pinhole that guy is. I was flipping channels one night and found some documentary about his band. Watched for a few minutes. There seemed to be absolutely nothing upstairs. Not just dumb, but it seemed like there was just nothing human in there, which I guess is why he can be great in some roles. There's no personality of his own that he has to try to suppress, as it's only emptiness. Jackie Chan. I still see Redditors speaking positively of him from time to time. You know, the whole doing his own stunts thing, but in the Chinese-speaking world, he's widely known as an unfaithful husband, a terrible father, and a CCP-supporting bootlicker. This is the first one in the comments that genuinely surprised me. I had no idea. He definitely puts on an "aw shucks" type of humbleness in any interviews I've seen him with in American media. Wouldn't have guessed that about him, and had never heard of any of it before. Elon Musk. The number of times I have heard about him paying off women because he has sexually harassed them. In what world is Elon Musk universally loved? Not universally, but he has a ton of diehard stans even now who think he's MCU's Tony Stark in real life. Chevy Chase. He is known to treat his coworkers like crap and has thrown out some racial slurs. My favorite story about Chase is Bill Murray yelling that he was a medium talent after they got into a physical altercation. I love it because saying no talent would just seem like Murray was mad and throwing insults. But medium talent is like, I know you had enough ability to get where you are, but so do a lot of mediocre comedians. It's the kind of insult that sticks in your head for a while, especially for an egomaniac like Chevy. It's called damning with faint praise, and Murray is clearly the master of it. If you're famous enough to be universally loved, there will be a part of the population who hates you for being an asshole. There is no one on earth who appeals to everyone. Betty White, and that guy with the sweaters who read to children, Mr. Rogers? I don't think he's famous enough to be universally loved, but Mitch Albom, aka the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, hosted him at an author event for a small venue, and he was furious that the event was so beneath him. Was furious we didn't have a plate of fresh fruit for him. He didn't have a rider or anything demanding we have fruit at the ready, just expected us to know. Was furious that more people didn't show up to fawn over him. Was just generally furious. Instead of talking about his book during the lecture, he spent 20 minutes taking a steaming dump over the staff, venue, and audience. Ironic, given the subject of his books. This Morrie fella must have been a saint to spend every Tuesday with him. Mr. T is one huge idiot. This happened in the 80s and Mr. T was everything at this time. My friend and I were downtown, we were 15 and it was our first trip downtown alone. Saw Mr. T and started towards him for an autograph. As we were walking, he parked his car in front of a bank, and two little boys, about 7 years old, ran up to him, happy as hell. It was Mr. T! This bastard yelled, "Get out of my way, you little motherfrickers," and pushed the kid into his friend. I've hated that bastard ever since. If we had cells back then, a lot of stars would have been canceled. People did and got away with stuff because there was never any proof. Now there is. If you live in Chicago, there are a handful of casinos you can go to, but arguably the nicest one is the Horseshoe in Hammond. You can go there almost any day of the week and play almost any game. And at some point in the night, someone will bring the conversation around to MJ. If you happen to play poker or craps, you'll usually cut down on the degrees of separation and hear from someone who actually saw, or claims to have seen for what it's worth, MJ play because they're apparently his favorite games. There are a lot of stories I've heard, but here's mine. This happened mid-2000s. I didn't grow up in Chicago, never was a Bulls fan, and didn't go through the hero worship, but I understood it. The guy was a legend. I can respect that. My friends who grew up in Chicago did their best to indoctrinate me. One friend in particular, a tiny, feisty, full-hearted, asthmatic, but incredibly athletically achieved Japanese girl, Izzy, you're the best, who grew up in the suburbs, led the charge. She, as a graduate student, had an MJ poster on her wall, and another on the ceiling above her bed. She could make you live his last championship three-pointer with the way she got excited about telling you where she was and how she felt when she saw it. She also carried around his baseball cards in the hopes of one day getting him to sign it. One night, a group of us are at the Horseshoe celebrating the end of a semester. Izzy doesn't gamble, but she knows MJ plays there sometimes and has come along just on the chance that he'll be there. This was, I believe, the third time she has come along with us just for that reason. We're playing craps and having a blast. We're excited and young and getting wasted. It's a good night. Our group is at one end of the craps table when we see the other players at the other end standing taller to look over at something. We turn around, and there he is, at the center and towards the front of this decent-sized group of people. People to either side are hushing up and craning their necks, but he's just walking, staring straight ahead, not even talking to his group. Some people have it in them to try to walk up to him. I wouldn't have. His demeanor is saying nothing but "don't bother me," but some people do, and he does stop for a few of them. Looking back, they were both blondes with tight clothes, but that didn't click with me. It didn't click with Izzy either. She starts to panic a little bit and her face turns red. She takes a few quick breaths before she says to herself mostly, "This is it. This is it. Oh my god." Before I even realize she's gone, she's halfway over to him, and he's done signing the blonde's chests or whatever. He starts walking again by the time she gets to him, and I remember what happened next like I was watching a slow-mo replay. He's walking towards us. Izzy's back is to us, and she's only a few feet away from him. I can tell she has both of her hands forward with the card, obviously looking for an autograph. She told us later that at that moment, she had just opened her mouth to introduce herself. Without looking down, she's barely 5 feet tall. Without breaking stride, he put his hands up, grabs her face like he's palming a basketball, and twists/pushes her head out of his way. Her head is almost twisted completely around and facing us, eyes closed and mouth scrunched against his hand, before she's off to the side and he's moving on. It was like he was pushing open a door. She stumbles a few steps and falls over, and one of his entourage almost trips over her before helping her up and apologizing for him. By this time, MJ is right next to us at the craps table, still looking straight ahead, but he has this smirk on his face I will never forget. I was mad. He didn't have to sign crap. He didn't even have to stop and say hi, but basic human decency stops way before grabbing someone's face and shoving them out of your way. Izzy was shocked and quiet for the rest of the night. At times, she was near tears, but never let us see them. Now, she was the first to say that he didn't owe her anything and is free to do what he wants. I noticed the next time I'm at her place, though, that the posters aren't there anymore, and as far as I know, she never told her story about his championship three-pointer again. That is the most heart-wrenching story I've read in a long, long time. So rude. I hope your friend is doing better now and is tearing crap up on her way to success. Mahatma Gandhi, treated his wife as a slave and literally no one knows his children. Might be the father of a nation, but definitely not a father figure to his kids. He slept with underage kids. Truly awful. Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'm not talking about taking advantage of people in vulnerable states and exploiting fear and trying to get famous by proving the paranormal, but Ed kept a young girl in their house. If I recall correctly, they told neighbors she was a fallen woman they were helping out by giving her a job as a live-in maid or nanny. She wasn't. She was a child, and he was a predator, and Lorraine did nothing about it. And yes, they had a kid in the house. Really sickened me to find out because I liked the Conjuring series as horror films and just enjoyed them for being kooky ghost hunters. Boy, was I wrong. I think the real Warrens were quacks, but the fictionalized versions in the movies are just that, fiction. Just like all the ghost stories, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson have such great chemistry, and the movies are fun. It's okay to enjoy them. Alec Baldwin. This has nothing to do with the Rust shooting. He is a jerk among jerks, and there were times I was thinking about giving out a good old ego check, but didn't. Grew up with him. He was a pretentious douche even then. Wanted to be called Xander before he eventually changed Alex to Alec. Always had rage issues and a massive ego. Thing is, his father was a teacher in the school district and was universally admired. Didn't really know his brothers, so can't speak of them. James Corden seems to be able to do no wrong in the US, but over in the UK, we can't stand the sight of him. His AMA was hilarious. So was the segment with Kimmel where he couldn't name a single crew member. Ellen DeGeneres. To be honest, I've always hated her and didn't understand why my mom always enjoyed watching her show. Ellen is the kind of person who would bitch over not getting as many birthday presents as she thinks she deserves. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.